Chapter 379. In the distance, Ji Qingxue, who was observing from afar, saw Bu Fong turn around and enter the store with a face full of satisfaction. Then, he walked over while trembling. He was really frightened by Blackie, waving its paw for no reason. Was that paw something that could be waved so casually? Even a supreme being could be swatted to death by a paw. How could he not tremble in fear? When Blackie once again started gobbling up the sweet and sour ribs on the porcelain plate, Ji Qingxue carefully walked into the store with a few young eunuchs. He came here today because he had something to discuss with owner Bu. Once he entered the store, Ji Qingxue couldn't help but take a deep breath. The fragrance that filled the air made him reveal a face full of enjoyment. He didn't immediately look for Bu Fong to discuss something. Instead, he found a seat and began to order dishes. He also ordered a portion of ice-hard jade and wine. After he ate and drank to his heart's content, he let out a breath of satisfaction. "Owner Bu, I have something to discuss with you." Sitting on a chair, Ji Qingxue looked at Bu Fong, who was curled up on a chair, and said. Bu Fong, who was originally squinting his eyes, suddenly felt a little puzzled and turned his head to look at Ji Qingxue. "You should know about the battle between supreme beings this time. It was extremely terrifying. More than half of the imperial city was destroyed in the battle. Many citizens were homeless and their moods were a little low." Ji Qingxue sighed and slowly said. Bu Fong became silent and didn't say anything. His gaze only continued to look at Ji Qingxue. "I would like to earnestly request owner Bu to cook some dishes for the citizens and use delicacies to alleviate their moods." Ji Qingxue sincerely looked at Bu Fong. This was also a method that he came up with after thinking for a long time. Owner Bu's dishes were dishes that could make people happy. It should be very effective in alleviating the citizens' sorrowful moods. However, he wasn't sure if Bu Fong would cook for him. He also didn't know how much it would cost to ask Bu Fong to cook for him. After all, if he wanted to cook a dish that could satisfy more than half of the people in the imperial capital, the amount of ingredients needed could not be underestimated. Bu Fong looked at Ji Qingxue in astonishment. He didn't expect Ji Qingxue to ask him to cook for him. Bu Fong did not refuse, because a large part of the reason for the battle between the Supremes was caused by him, and the destruction of half of the imperial capital was also related to him, so it was naturally not a problem for him to cook. However, he had already convinced Little Black, and 3 days later, he would start the mission and leave the imperial capital. Therefore, this event had to be brought forward as soon as possible. He told Ji Qingxue about this request, and Ji Qingxue's face immediately lit up with excitement. As long as Bu Fong was willing to help, it would be fine. As for the timing, it was not a problem. Ji Qingxue returned excitedly. He patted his chest and took on the task of preparing the ingredients. It was already not easy to get Bu Fong to help him. With the Light Wind Empire's treasury, preparing ingredients was still a piece of cake. The event was scheduled for the next day. Once Ji Qingxue returned to the imperial palace, he ordered people to spread the news. The news that the Black-Hearted Store's owner was going to cook for the citizens of the imperial capital quickly spread throughout the imperial capital. Everyone was filled with excitement and anticipation. Nowadays, the Black-Hearted Store's reputation in the imperial capital was like a thunderclap piercing the ears. From 70 to 80-year-old old men to 3-year-old Spanish children, everyone had heard of the Black-Hearted Store. How could people not be excited when the owner of such a famous store was going to cook for them? Some people were so excited that they couldn't sleep. The next morning, Bu Fong got out of bed early in the morning and went to the kitchen to practice his cutting and carving skills. After cooking an extra portion of sweet and sour ribs for Blackie, who was lying at the entrance, he opened the store. Xiao Xiaolong and Ouyang Xiaoyi both arrived at the store. Bu Fong let Xiao Xiaolong continue the business of the store and brought Ouyang Xiaoyi toward the main hall of the imperial palace of the Light Wind Empire. Since he had already promised Ji Qingxue, he naturally would not go back on his word. Yesterday, he had already informed Ji Qingxue about the ingredients he needed and asked him to prepare them in advance. Now, he was heading over to prepare the ingredients. Light Wind Empire's imperial capital, Gate of Heavenly Mystery Plaza. The vast gate of Heavenly Mystery Plaza was packed with citizens of the imperial capital. This place had practically turned into a small bazaar. Since the houses of the citizens were destroyed, these citizens were all gathered here. Some of them set up tents, while others took advantage of the chaos to set up stalls. Business was booming. Bufong was dumbfounded at the sight of this bustling scene. He felt as if he had returned to the market in his previous life. Bufong squeezed through the gate of Heavenly Mystery Plaza with Ouyang Xiaoyi and directly entered the imperial palace. Ji Qingxue, who was in the main hall, was already waiting for Bufong. When he saw Bufong arrive, he personally led Bufong to the imperial kitchen. The imperial kitchen was very neat and tidy. A row of chefs was excitedly staring at Bufong. In the Light Wind Empire, Bufong was the idol of all chefs. After the ingredients filled the entire room, Bufong lightly nodded his head and picked up a kitchen knife. He began to skillfully prepare the ingredients. The speed at which Bufong swung the kitchen knife was extremely fast. An average person would not be able to follow it with their naked eyes. The sound of the kitchen knife colliding with the chopping board seemed to have a very harmonious rhythm. The moment the knife gleamed, it was like a shooting star streaking across the sky, instantly stunning the onlookers. In just a short while, the large pile of ingredients was completely prepared. As for Bufong, he also began to prepare his dish. The dish had to be large and suitable for a large number of people. Without a doubt, it was the rainbow-colored crescent moon dumplings. This was the dish that he won the previous 100 family banquet. Using it to cook would not be a disgrace to his reputation. When bowls of white and tender dumplings came out of the pot and were placed in piping hot bowls, they were served to the people who had been waiting for a long time on the gate of Tianjin Square. Excited shouts immediately rang out from the gate of Tianjin Square. When the first person bit into the wrapper of the rainbow-colored crescent moon dumpling, the aroma of the meat surged out. Numerous fragrances converged together, and a multicolored radiance burst forth from the dumplings. It was as if clouds of various colors were forming in the sky. It was extremely beautiful. Every person who ate the rainbow-colored crescent moon dumplings had an intoxicated expression on their face. The joyful emotions contained within the crescent moon dumplings made these people, who were originally sad due to being displaced, feel much better. They were filled with hope for the future. In the majestic palace within the 100,000 mountains, Deacon Feng slowly led a group of disciples out of the hall and stopped on the square. Executive Feng's gaze swept across the crowd. There was not the slightest trace of a smile on his meticulous face. Instead, there was a hint of coldness on his face. Normally, none of you have ever ventured into the training grounds. This time, I will bring you all into the training grounds and face the natives of the training grounds. You all need to train and fight. These natives with low cultivation levels are just right for you all. This is a test for you all. I hope that you all will not disappoint me and the sect. Executive Feng solemnly said. After he finished speaking, two figures walked out from behind him. They were two figures wrapped in gray robes. Executive Feng nodded his head at the two of them, and a powerful aura burst forth from their bodies. They formed hand seals, and a formless wave of energy was immediately released from the surroundings of the palace. Rays of light flowed into the bodies of the disciples who were about to set out. After doing all this, Executive Feng nodded his head in satisfaction. He waved his hand, and a huge warship appeared out of thin air. It grew larger and larger until it covered the entire sky. The huge spirit warship floated in the air and emitted a majestic aura. The faces of the disciples were filled with fanaticism. When all the disciples had boarded the warship, Executive Feng also floated up and stepped on the void as he entered the warship. A rumble resounded. It was like the sound of a morning bell. The warship began to move slowly in the air. It emitted a violent whistling sound as it sped forward. It rushed out of the 100,000 mountains and sped toward the illusory spirit swamp. The crystal mine cannot be lost. It must be controlled by the Grand Baron sect. Any natives who dare to obstruct us will be killed without mercy. Executive Feng stood proudly at the forefront of the battlefield. He didn't care about the howling of the wind and the fluttering of his clothes. He remained unmoved. The battlefield slowly flew out of the 100,000 mountains and flew above the clear sky pagoda. The experts in the clear sky pagoda didn't dare to breathe loudly. All the experts in the clear sky pagoda were terrified. Executive Feng, who stood at the forefront of the warship, shot a disdainful glance at the clear sky pagoda. After the warship left, Bei Gongming was filled with grief and indignation. His goal was to go to the light wind imperial city and watch over the kid who had devoured the heaven and earth obsidian flames. He would wait for Executive Feng to return and take back the 10,000 bestial flames. Bei Gongming was extremely unwilling and resentful. He couldn't wait to see the miserable fate of the kid who had smashed him with a wok 3 times. Executive Feng was an existence in the divine physique echelon. Wouldn't dealing with a kid who was only at the 7th grade be as easy as kneading mud? Even if that puppet could rival a peak supreme being, in front of a divine physique echelon expert, it was just an ant. Tremble. Damn natives. I have already prepared the black wok, and am ready to smash it back. Chapter 380. After opening the store's doors, sunlight shone down from the heavens and shone onto Bu Feng's body. It gave off a warm and comfortable feeling. Blackie was lying on the ground, resting with its eyes closed. It didn't pay any attention to Bu Feng, who had just walked out of the store. After yawning and stretching, Bu Feng, who was wearing a white robe, walked to Blackie's side and rubbed its head. Blackie woke up from its slumber and glared at Bu Feng angrily. Don't disturb Lord Go when there's no sweet and sour ribs. Don't sleep anymore. Get ready to set off. We're about to start our mission. The corners of Bu Feng's mouth twitched. He didn't care about Lord Go's angry gaze and continued to rub its head. Blackie was taken aback. Start a mission? Bu Feng had already entrusted most of the store's matters to Xiao Xiaolong. However, he wasn't too worried because Xiao Xiaolong was already familiar with the business. After all, Bu Feng was always out of the store. Bu Feng stood up and slightly raised its head. He saw a white speck of light slowly emerging above his head. Then, it increased in number and began to draw out a mysterious teleportation array. Host, please pay attention. The teleportation of the illusory spirit swamp is about to begin. The system's solemn and earnest voice suddenly resounded in Bu Feng's mind, causing Bu Feng's mind to shiver. Lord Go raised its eyes and glanced at the teleportation array above Bu Feng's head. A trace of astonishment flashed through its eyes. Super long-distance teleportation array? It's such a waste to use this kind of teleportation array on such a small scale. Lord Go muttered in its heart. Then, it saw waves of wind coming from the teleportation array. Whoosh! Soon, a strong hurricane surged out from the teleportation array and wrapped around Bu Feng's body. Was the teleportation about to begin? Bu Feng was summoning Blackie. Blackie calmly stood up from the ground. With graceful cat-like steps, it gradually stepped into the hurricane. Buzz, a wave of fluctuation resounded. Then, Bu Feng and Blackie disappeared without a trace. The front of the store regained its tranquility. Illusory spirit swamp. A white speck of light suddenly appeared in the sky above a swamp. In an instant, the number of white specks of light increased. Very quickly, they covered the sky and formed a formation. A gust of wind rose, sweeping up the mud and water in the swamp, and the sound of water splashing resounded without end. The little spirit beast in the swamp was even swept up into the sky by the strong wind with a blank look on its face. The gale suddenly dissipated, revealing a figure. Without the support of the gust of wind, the swamp that covered the sky fell down with a thud. Blackie stood beside Bu Feng and looked at its surroundings with disgust. The ground was filled with sticky swamp mud, and the stench made Blackie want to close its nose. What kind of a messy place was this? Bu Feng looked around and suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. Although the environment in the illusory spirit swamp was not much different, there were still some places that were unique. Not far ahead is the location of the Serpent Men's herb garden. Yufu's Serpent Men tribe is there. Bu Feng thought to himself, and slightly squinted his eyes. He thought about Yu Fu. After returning to the Serpent Men tribe, there seemed to be no news of her. Could it be that she was addicted to the Serpent Men tribe and didn't want to return to the store? Since he was here today, he decided to go to the Serpent Men tribe and take a look. He wanted to see what happened to Yu Fu. Logically speaking, she should have returned to the store a long time ago. With this thought in mind, Bu Fong led Blackie, whose face was filled with disgust and unwillingness, toward the Serpent Men tribe. Indeed, after a short while, he saw the simple fence of the Serpent Men's herb garden. Since he saw the Serpent Men's herb garden, the Serpent Men tribe shouldn't be far away. As Bu Fong stepped over the fence, Blackie waved its paw and directly smashed the fence into pieces. Then, it raised its head and continued forward with graceful cat-like steps. Bu Fong rolled his eyes. What had sunder a dog? The spirit herbs in the Serpent Men's herb garden were still flourishing. However, the current Bu Fong naturally didn't care for these low-grade spirit herbs, so he didn't pay much attention to them. As for Blackie, it was even more so. A man and a dog quickly crossed the herb garden. At this time, they were finally noticed by the Serpent Men guarding the herb garden. Who is it? With a loud roar, several Serpent Men with spears in their hands swayed their bodies and surrounded Bu Fong. Bu Fong calmly glanced at the Serpent Men guards surrounding him and frowned. Stop fooling around. Go and find your chief, Yu Fu. Bu Fong's words caused the surrounding Serpent Men to be taken aback. Was there a hole in the brain of this human who brought a dog with him? Just because he called for their chief, the chief would come over? Was he here to make a joke? A disdainful sneer appeared on the faces of the guards. This human was really arrogant. Was the chief someone he could meet whenever he wanted? Be obedient and come with us. The chief isn't someone that any random cat, dog can meet. The Serpent Man guard sneered. He glanced at Blackie, who was beside Bu Fong, and waved his spear. The spear, which was emitting a chilling aura, was immediately pointed at Bu Fong. Blackie looked at the group of guards waving their spears and immediately rolled its eyes. It was ready to raise its paw. This group of ant-like serpent men could be disposed of with a wave of its paw. Why is this brat Bu Fong wasting time with them? The sooner he finishes his mission, the sooner he can go back to sleep. Seeing that Blackie was about to make a move, Bu Fong immediately coughed to stop it. He looked toward the Serpent Men guards, and the aura of a 7th grade battle saint burst out from his body. Don't wave your paw at the slightest provocation. I have to convince people with reason, Bu Fong thought. The guards were not stupid. When they sensed the aura of a 7th grade battle saint on Bu Fong's body, their expressions changed drastically. The human in front of them was actually a 7th grade battle saint. Fear suddenly emerged in the hearts of the guards. Facing a 7th grade battle saint, the strongest among them was only a 5th grade battle king. How could they be a match? Take me to your chief, Bu Fong calmly said. The Serpent Men guards did not dare to refuse. They could only lead Bu Fong toward the Serpent Men tribe. They did not know Bu Fong, so they did not know that Bu Fong had come to the Serpent Men tribe before. In the distance, it seemed that the Serpent Men had received news that a human had invaded the Serpent Men tribe. The elite Serpent Men guards rushed over. There was even a loud roar that resounded. Who dares to trespass my Serpent Men tribe? With an angry roar, a violent figure dashed over from afar, stirring up the mud on the ground. The Serpent Man, I glared at the surroundings. The surrounding Serpent Men looked at him with respect on their faces. The Serpent Man, I was the commander of their guards. His cultivation level had already reached the 7th grade battle saint realm. He was incomparably powerful. With Commander I making a move, this human who dared to trespass the Serpent Men tribe was finished. The Serpent Man Ani's aura was extremely powerful. His eyes were wide open like bronze bells. The muscles on his upper body were densely packed, filled with explosive power. As soon as he appeared, his gaze swept over and landed on the guards. You said that a human dared to trespass our Serpent Men tribe? He even dared to shamelessly say that he wanted to see the chief. I said. As he spoke, his gaze passed over the guards and landed on Bu Fong, who was standing in the middle of the guards and looking at him with a smile that was not a smile. When the Serpent Men guards saw On Ni's arrival, he immediately regained his confidence. He hurriedly told Ni what had happened, adding fuel to the fire. "This arrogant human, you will suffer. Since you dared to act tough, you will have to bear the price of acting tough." However, his expression suddenly froze. His voice became weaker and weaker, until it was almost inaudible. His eyes widened, filled with disbelief and fear as he stared into the distance. He saw that the moment the commander, Ni, whom he greatly admired, saw that human, his tyrannical aura disappeared. He quickly ran to the front of the human and bowed respectfully. The Serpent Men guard was a little dumbfounded. This scene was simply too shocking. Was this still the dignified commander, Ni, that they usually knew? Was it still the domineering commander, Ni, who could tear a 6th-rank spirit beast apart and slay a 7th-rank spirit beast with his bare hands? "Io, Honorbu, why are you here? You didn't even inform Ni when you came." When Ni saw Bu Fong, his heart shuddered. Then, he was extremely surprised and quickly said respectfully. He had no choice but to be respectful. Who was the person in front of him? He was the owner of the Black-Hearted store in the Light Wind Imperial City. That Black-Hearted store was incomparably valiant. A large number of 8th-grade war gods had died there. He did not dare to challenge the human in front of him. Besides, there was no need for him to do so. Bu Fong had always been his idol. He even wanted to learn cooking from Bu Fong, but Bu Fong rejected him mercilessly. But that didn't stop him from admiring Bu Fong. Bu Fong looked at Ni, who was full of excitement and respect, and felt as if he had seen a fan. He felt a little elated and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Where's Yu Fu? She should have already returned to the Serpent Men tribe, right? Could it be that she hasn't settled the matters in the tribe?" Bu Fong didn't hesitate. He looked at the Serpent Man, Ni, and asked directly. His purpose of coming to the Serpent Men tribe was to find out about Yu Fu's matter. That last was his apprentice chef. He should show some concern for her. However, when Bu Fong mentioned Yu Fu's name, the faces of the Serpent Men in the surroundings instantly became unsightly. The excited On Ni's face stiffened. He looked at Bu Fong embarrassedly, and his eyes were filled with hesitation. Bu Fong suddenly felt that something was wrong. He furrowed his brows and asked, "What's going on?" An took a deep breath. He seemed to feel that Bu Fong's expression was becoming colder and colder. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. His eyes glanced at the lazy fat dog beside Bu Fong. His pupils constricted, and he felt as if his heart was being grasped by an invisible hand. He couldn't even breathe. Why is this dog here? This fat dog was as terrifying as a devil. The scene of Blackie killing a group of 8th-grade war gods with a single palm was still deeply imprinted in his mind. It was difficult to erase it. Now that he saw Blackie, he subconsciously felt fear. However, when he met Bu Fong's ice-cold gaze, his heart trembled. In the end, he still opened his mouth. However, his eyes seemed to be wandering. Yu Fu encountered a small problem. She isn't in the tribe now. However, Owner Bu, Yu Fu might not go back to learn cooking from you in the future. Chapter 381. Yu Fu might not be able to go back to learn cooking from you in the future. And I said these words with some trepidation. From time to time, he would pay attention to Bu Fong's expression, for fear that if Bu Fong became unhappy, the dog beside him would slap him to death with its paw. However, his worries were superfluous. Blackie rolled its eyes and ignored him. A little serpent man was not worthy of the Lord Go's claws. When Bu Fong heard this, his reaction was not as extreme as I had expected. He just slightly furrowed his brows, feeling a little puzzled. What do you mean? What happened to Yu Fu? Bu Fong asked in confusion. I heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. However, he did not dare to look at Bu Fong's eyes. He clenched his teeth and said, "Let the chief explain it to you personally. I'm not good with words, so I can't speak clearly." Bu Fong didn't mind, so he nodded. Disperse, disperse. Why are all of you so nervous with your spears in your hands? This Senior Bu is a friend of our Serpent Men tribe. When I saw Bu Fong nod, his face immediately lit up. Then, He turned around and looked at the group of serpent men guards. His eyes immediately widened. He waved his hand and shouted with a straight face. He really did have the aura of a commander. Bufong found it a little funny, but he just let I lead the way. The serpent men guards immediately looked at the back of Bufong and I in awe. Along the way, I excitedly introduced everything about the serpent men tribe to Bufong. Bufong was a little surprised. He had not been here for a long time, but the serpent men tribe had undergone many changes. Compared to the previous simple and crude appearance, the current serpent men tribe could be considered to be much more prosperous. Although it was still a small tribe, the houses and everything else had become brand new. The surrounding serpent men's faces seemed to be a little different from before. I brought Bufong to the front of a small house. He first let Bufong rest inside for a while. Then he wagged his tail and went to find the patriarch. Bufong nodded, clasped his hands behind his back, and waited in this much more exquisite room. He wanted to find a crystal mine in the illusory spirit swamp. Perhaps he could ask the chief of the serpent men tribe. After all, he was not very familiar with the illusory spirit swamp. If the chief could lead the way, he might be able to familiarize himself with the place. After a while, I brought several figures over from afar. One of them was the spirited serpent man Yufeng, the current chief of the serpent men tribe. After all, his cultivation was the highest. Beside him were a few elders of the serpent men tribe, but Yu Fu was nowhere to be seen. Bufong slightly raised his eyebrows. He suddenly felt a hint of playfulness in the air. Things didn't seem to be as simple as he thought. Ha ha! Owner Bu, welcome back to the serpent men tribe. Yufeng saw Bufong from afar, but there was not the slightest hint of disrespect on his face. He respectfully walked over with the serpent men elders and said with a big smile. Bufong was not as enthusiastic as the other party, and only lightly nodded his head. Yufeng felt a little awkward. After all, his enthusiastic greeting was met with a cold response from Bufong. It felt a little strange. Let's cut to the chase. I heard from I that Yu Fu doesn't intend to practice cooking with me. Bufong went straight to the point and directly asked Yufeng. The expression on Yufeng's face slightly changed, and he awkwardly said, I doesn't know how to speak. How could Yu Fu not intend to practice cooking with Owner Bu? It is Yu Fu's honor to be able to become Owner Bu's apprentice. It's just that there was a little unexpected situation, so what's the situation? Bufong did not show the slightest trace of politeness and indifferently asked. When the surrounding serpent men elders saw Bufong's overbearing manner, their complexions did not look too good. After all, Yufeng was their chieftain, and he represented the prestige of the serpent men tribe. Yet, he was being questioned by a young brat in such a manner. Naturally, they were not in a good mood. Sir, can you speak with a little more respect? After all, Yufeng is the chieftain of our serpent men tribe, and he represents the dignity of our tribe. Isn't it a little inappropriate for you to be so overbearing? The serpent men chieftain said to Bufong with dissatisfaction. Bufong furrowed his brows, and his gaze fell on the serpent men elder. His gaze was somewhat cold. Yufeng's heart suddenly shivered, and he hurriedly changed the topic. Owner Bu, it's like this. The last time we called Yu Fu back, it was because there was an urgent matter. A few days ago, our Grand Serpentine City's annual tribal assembly was held. As the daughter of our chieftain, Yu Fu naturally could not be absent. Moreover, Yu Fu has already come of age, and she needed to go to the Grand Serpentine City to receive the Serpentine Sovereign's holy water baptism. Then, what does this have to do with Yu Fu not being my apprentice? Bufong's gaze fell on Yufeng once again as he asked. Yufeng's expression was somewhat awkward, and he continued to say, Every year, the Grand Serpentine City would select a few talented serpent men from each tribe to enter the city, and they would become residents of the city. These residents would also have the opportunity to become the Serpentine Sovereign's apprentice. Yu Fu was tested to have an astonishing talent, so she was recommended as a candidate to become the Serpentine Sovereign's apprentice. After going through many rounds of selection, she became the Serpentine Sovereign's apprentice. Bufong listened attentively, and he did not interrupt. He knew of the Serpentine Sovereign, and he had even seen one of them in the 100,000 Mountains. That beautiful serpent man had a powerful cultivation, and she even joined hands with the other supreme beings to attack Xiao Bai. Could it be that she was the Serpentine Sovereign? Interesting. Could it be that the Serpentine Sovereign had taken a fancy to Yu Fu's talent? So he wanted to take her as his apprentice and forbade Yu Fu from learning culinary arts from him? That was a little overbearing. As expected, Yu Feng revealed the reason why Yu Fu couldn't continue learning culinary arts from Bu Feng. After the Serpentine Sovereign met Yu Fu personally, he decided to pass on his mantle to Yu Fu. In other words, Yu Fu would be the next Serpentine Sovereign, the master of the Grand Serpentine City. With such a noble status, the Serpentine Sovereign naturally wouldn't allow her to continue learning culinary arts from you. Yu Feng didn't say anything else after he finished speaking, and he carefully observed Bu Feng's expression. Bu Feng squinted his eyes, and he suddenly understood what was going on. So that was the case. The Serpent Men tribe had also benefited from Yu Fu's association. No wonder there was such a huge change. Moreover, the aura of Yu Feng's cultivation had become much more powerful, and he was on the verge of breaking through to 8th grade war god. So it was because Yu Fu had become the successor of the Grand Serpentine City. TSK. Interesting. What is Yu Fu thinking? Could it be that she doesn't want to learn culinary arts from me? Bu Feng asked as he looked at Yu Feng. Yu Feng's expression suddenly became sluggish, and he started to stammer. The corners of Bu Feng's mouth curled up, and his heart turned cold. It seemed like that was indeed the case. Yu Fu's talent in culinary arts was much more powerful than her talent in cultivation. Moreover, from the fact that Yu Fu diligently practiced her culinary arts every day in the store, Bu Feng could tell that this serpent woman truly loved culinary arts. It was impossible for her to abandon it for the sake of fame and wealth. It was obvious that the serpent men were forcing her. As for how they forced her, Bu Feng didn't really want to know. He only needed to know that someone was forcing his apprentice to do something she didn't like. The temptation of fame and wealth wasn't something that anyone could resist. A father's status depended on his daughters, and the tribe also benefited from it. The more Bu Feng thought about it, the angrier he became. His gaze toward Yu Feng became somewhat cold. Speak, why aren't you speaking? What is Yu Fu's opinion? Bu Feng asked as he looked at Yu Feng coldly. Yu Feng licked his lips, feeling a little awkward. What else could Yu Fu's attitude be? She would rather die than submit. She said that she liked to learn culinary arts and wanted to return to the imperial city to study under Bu Feng. However, how could she miss such an opportunity? What future would there be in learning culinary arts? Even if she was beaten to death, she would still be a chef. Compared to becoming the future Serpentine Sovereign, it was like comparing clouds to mud. Yu Feng naturally hoped that Yu Fu would become the Serpentine Sovereign's disciple. This would be beneficial to both him and the Serpent Men tribe. Moreover, it wasn't a bad thing for Yu Fu. Owner Bu, you should know that becoming the Serpentine Sovereign's disciple is a glorious matter that brings honor to the ancestors. The Serpentine Sovereign is a supreme being. Yu Feng wanted to explain. However, Bu Feng just waved his hand, not bothering to listen to what he had to say. Becoming the Serpentine Sovereign's disciple is an honorable matter, but becoming my Bu Feng's apprentice is a shameful matter. This decision of yours is very courageous. Bu Feng sneered coldly. Yu Feng didn't say anything else. The Serpent Men elder behind him finally couldn't bear it anymore. Bu Feng's overbearing attitude infuriated the Serpent Men. Seeing that the negotiations had broken down and that both sides had shed all pretense of cordiality, the Serpent Men elder naturally stepped forward to speak. How can you understand the honor of becoming the Serpentine Sovereign? What future will Her Highness Yu Fu have by learning culinary arts from you? If she follows the Serpentine Sovereign, she will become the Serpentine Sovereign's master. You dare to compare yourself to the Serpentine Sovereign? Who do you think you are? Are you even worthy? The Serpent Men elder's words caused Yu Feng and On Ni's expressions to change. On Ni seemed to be somewhat angry as he glared at the Serpent Men elder. Yufeng was also somewhat hesitant, but after thinking about it, he finally sighed and didn't stop him. Indeed, from Yufeng's point of view, becoming the Serpentine Sovereign's disciple was much more glorious than becoming Bufang's apprentice. You shut up. Bufang was not in a good mood. His face turned cold when he heard the nagging elder. With a wave of his hand, green smoke filled the air and a black shadow instantly flew toward the serpent person. This serpent man elder was a 7th grade battle saint, so he was naturally not inferior to Bufang. After all, the cultivation level Bufang displayed was merely that of a 7th grade battle saint. Becoming the disciple of a supreme being or becoming the apprentice of a battle saint. Was there even a need to choose between these two? Even a fool would know what to choose. Humph! How dare you? How dare you act so presumptuously in the Serpent Men tribe? The Serpent Man elder sneered. True energy immediately burst forth from his body as he sent a palm strike toward the black shadow that Bufang had thrown at him. However, the instant the serpent person elder came into contact with the black shadow, his originally confident expression instantly turned ugly. It was because he finally saw the shape of the black shadow clearly. It was actually a wok. When his palm struck the wok, it was as if he had struck a towering mountain. He was unable to move his opponent in the slightest. The momentum of the black wok didn't slow down at all. It directly smashed through the elder's arm, causing it to explode with a bang and turn into a mist of blood. He let out a miserable howl as he looked at the black wok that continued to smash toward him with a face full of terror. Yufeng's pupils constricted. He watched helplessly as the elder was crushed by Bufang's black wok and crushed to death on the spot. With a wave of his hand, the untainted black wok flew back into Bufang's hand and floated above his palm. You know that the Serpentine Sovereign is a supreme being, but how do you know how powerful I am? Bufang said expressionlessly. Even the Serpentine Sovereign would be smashed silly by his wok, let alone a mere battle saint. Chapter 382. After smashing a serpent men elder into pieces with a single wok, Bufang's aura suddenly soared. With the black turtle constellation wok hovering in his hand, Bufang coldly stared at the serpent men. Blackie raised its doggy head in astonishment. It didn't expect that Bufang could be so domineering, smashing the wok without a word. He had the temperament of the Lord Go. Yufeng's complexion was extremely unsightly. The serpent men elders behind him were even more enraged. Their gazes toward Bufang were filled with rage. Under the watchful eyes of so many people, Bufang actually dared to kill one of their tribesmen without the slightest scruple. Moreover, it was a 7th grade battle saint. This was no different from looking down on the serpent men tribe. Yufeng's complexion was unsightly. He took a deep breath, but he didn't think of pursuing the matter. He didn't have the ability or the courage to do so. He wasn't the Serpentine Sovereign, nor was he a supreme being. Facing Bufang and a lazy fat dog beside Bufang, they could only grit their teeth and swallow their anger. I looked at the elder who was smashed to death by Bufang's wok and couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Bufang was his idol. That elder was disrespectful to his idol. Now he was smashed to death. Chief, don't tell me that this arrogant brat before us killed our tribesmen. Aren't you going to do something? The serpent men elders suppressed the anger in their hearts and said to Yufeng. Their voices were filled with dissatisfaction. Yufeng had an unspeakable bitterness in his heart. The black turtle constellation wok hovered above Bufang's palm as he coldly looked at them. Hearing the words of the elders, the corners of his mouth curled up, and he said, Yufu is my Bufang's apprentice. As long as she still loves cooking, no one can deprive her of her right to be a chef. Not you guys, not even the Serpentine Sovereign. Arrogant. The serpent men elders were so angry that their chests were heaving up and down. This is Her Highness Yufu's tribe. A human like you is not allowed to act presumptuously here. An old serpent woman roared fiercely. Her eyes emitted a sharp glint. Bufang shot a glance at the old woman. With a wave of his hand, the black turtle constellation wok whizzed out. The old woman's heart trembled, and she dodged in fear. She didn't dare to face the walk head-on. The fate of the elder who was smashed into pieces by this walk was still vivid in her mind. She was not a fool, so how could she dare to fight it head-on? Owner Boo, can you give me some face and not cause trouble in my tribe? The lords of the Grand Serpentman City are in our tribe as guests. If you anger them, I'm afraid, Yu Feng said to Bu Fong with an ugly expression on his face. You want me to give you face when you threaten me? Sure enough, you've grown stronger. The corners of his mouth curved upward into an indifferent smile. Using the experts of the Grand Serpentman City to threaten him? Could it be that the experts of the Grand Serpentman City could make Yu Feng feel so confident? No. How could I dare to threaten Owner Boo? It's just that I am a chief. I hope that Owner Boo can let me off the hook and not make things difficult for me. Although Yu Feng had the support of the Grand Serpentman City, he still knew how terrifying Bu Fong was. Therefore, he still tried to be tactful. The black turtle constellation walk flew back into Bu Fong's hand. Bu Fong glanced at Yu Feng and said calmly, Fine. As long as Yu Fu goes back with me, everything can be discussed. Yu Feng was put in a difficult position. You brat, you don't know what's good for you. Do you really think our tribe is a pushover? Her Highness Yu Fu is the next Serpentine sovereign. How can a lowly human brat like you hope to get close to her? At this moment, many of the elders couldn't bear it anymore, and they all shouted. Yu Fu was the Serpentman tribe's chance to make a comeback. How could they let go of such an opportunity? They weren't fools to let the future Serpentine sovereign, the ruler of the Grand Serpentman City, leave with a human brat. All the elders attacked furiously, charging toward Bu Fong. Since they couldn't come to an agreement, they would fight. Elders, stop. Ani's expression changed when he saw this scene. He worshipped Bu Fong and didn't want Bu Fong to fall out with the Serpentman tribe. After all, they were all friends. He swung his serpent tail and blocked the attacks of several Serpentman elders as he shouted, Don't worry, Elder Bu Fong, Elder Bu Fong. The black turtle constellation walk floated in front of him. The Serpentman elders' attacks landed on the walk, but it didn't budge at all. Ani's face turned pale. He had just broken through to the Battle Saint realm. Blocking the attacks of so many Battle Saints alone made him feel weak. Bu Fong pressed on Ani's shoulder and pulled him back. Ani's figure floated behind him. Bu Fong waved the black turtle constellation walk and blocked the Serpentman elders' attacks once again. His casual manner caused the Serpentman elders' expressions to change. Ani, are you trying to betray our Serpentman tribe? The old serpent woman narrowed her eyes as she looked at the pale-faced Ani and shouted coldly. Ani's body trembled. He opened his mouth and wanted to explain, but he was interrupted by Bu Fong. Don't try to use the tribe's righteousness to pressure people. You guys only made Yu Fu the Serpentine sovereign's disciple for your own vanity. You should have asked Yu Fu what she likes. Bu Fong's palm shrank slightly, and the black turtle constellation walk was actually compressed to the size of saucer. Oomph. The Serpentine sovereign's honor isn't something a human like you can understand. The serpent woman's expression was still cold as she sneered. You're noisy. Bu Fong indifferently glanced at her and casually waved his hand. The black turtle constellation walk, which had been compressed to the size of a saucer, whizzed out and smashed toward the serpent woman at lightning speed. The serpent woman's expression changed. She wriggled her snake tail and retreated backward, trying to avoid Bu Fong's attack. However, the speed of the black turtle constellation walk, which had shrunk after being compressed, was simply too fast. With a whooshing sound, it arrived in front of the serpent woman. The serpent woman let out an unwilling roar and pushed her palms forward, trying to push the black turtle constellation walk away. However, the black turtle constellation walk's weight wasn't something a 7th-grade battle saint could push away. It crushed down and directly shattered the serpent woman's palms. The serpent woman let out a shrill scream and was sent flying. Lords of the Serpentman City, please attack. This arrogant human wants to take Her Highness Yu Fu away. The serpent woman was paralyzed on the ground. Her hair was disheveled, and her eyes were filled with extreme hatred. She angrily roared, Yufeng's expression changed when he heard her roar. He took a step forward and tried to stop the serpent woman from continuing her roar. However, it was too late. Honorbu, leave quickly. Yufeng sighed as he looked at Bu Fong with a complicated expression on his face. The lords of the Serpent Men City were all Supreme Being experts. Although the Black Dog was strong, even if it could stop a Supreme Being expert, the other 8th grade war gods, including Honorbu, couldn't stop them. Bu Fong indifferently glanced at him and remained indifferent. Rumble. In the distance, surging energy soared into the sky. Several snake men shot over from afar, bringing with them a majestic pressure. A fanatical expression appeared on the serpent woman's face. Lord, it's this arrogant human. He wants to take Her Highness Yu Fu away. Who dares to take away the future successor of our Grand Serpent Men City in front of me? Do you want to start a war with our Grand Serpent Men City? A deafening voice resounded as a voice fell from the sky. It was a serpent man with a head full of white hair. His scales emitted a blood-red color, and terrifying true energy surged from his body. Without a doubt, he was a supreme being. Bu Fong was too familiar with the aura of a supreme being. Although the aura of this serpent man expert was much weaker than most of the supreme beings he had met before, he was still a supreme being. The serpent man's eyes were like a blood-colored ball of light, shooting out a red beam of light toward Bu Fong. There was only one human present, and that was Bu Fong. His gaze naturally fell on Bu Fong. Arrogant brat, you're dead meat. The serpent woman's eyes were filled with resentment as her arms were smashed by the black turtle constellation walk. I was also worried. He tugged at Bu Fong's sleeves and signaled for Bu Fong to escape. You really talk a lot. Bu Fong furrowed his brows. With a single thought, the black turtle constellation walk whizzed out once again. It seemed as though it was going to tear through the air. In an instant, it flew past the serpent woman and smashed her into pieces. She died on the spot. Even if you're a supreme being, so what? It's not a reason to let you live. Bu Fong's calm voice reverberated in the air, and it caused many people's hearts to tremble. The expression of the supreme being of the serpent men race, who stood proudly in the sky, became ice-cold. His eyes narrowed, and his killing intent surged. You dare to kill someone in front of me? You're really arrogant. You're completely looking down on this exalted one. Chapter 383. Huh? Ridicule? With a casual pat from Bu Fong, the golden flames abruptly swelled up and filled the sky with golden flames. As if it had transformed into a sea of fire, it collided with the scarlet flames of the serpent person sovereign. Yu Feng, who was standing not too far away, suddenly changed his expression. Seeing that the serpent man's sovereign seemed to want to attack Bu Fong, Yu Feng's expression became somewhat hesitant. He grasped the spear that had been bounced off, and his figure surged forward. With a tremendous pressure, he charged toward Bu Fong. The Supreme Serpent Man frowned slightly and said coldly, So, you are the one who wants to take Her Highness Yu Fu away? The Serpent Man's sovereign sneered and swung his fiery red snake tail. His figure suddenly broke through the air, raising a sky full of flames, which turned into a monstrous giant palm and slapped down on Bu Fong. The Supreme Serpent Man, who was in so much pain that he found it hard to breathe, went completely berserk. He swung his tail, and his whole body shot out like an arrow. A black spear appeared in his hand, and he pointed it at Bu Fong as it whistled downwards. Blackie, who was lying beside Bu Fong, lazily raised its eyes and snorted. The black turtle constellation walk also directly swelled up as though it had really become a small mountain. Under the control of Bu Fong's will, it once again smashed towards the Supreme Serpent Man with a golden radiance. As the black turtle constellation walk spun in his hand, Bu Fong exhaled softly. Were they really going to die? Bu Fong swept an indifferent glance at the Serpent Man's Supreme Being and curled the corner of his mouth. I don't care if this dog knows how to talk or not. I'll just kill it first. Bu Fong quietly stood at his original spot, without the slightest hint of fear on his face. You little snake, how dare you look down on Lord Go? If Yu Fu is willing to be the successor of this whatever grand serpentman city, I naturally won't say anything. However, if you guys are threatening her, as her life teacher in culinary arts, I naturally won't stand idly by, Bufang said. A mere 7th grade battle saint actually dared to challenge the dignity of a supreme being expert. The Black Turtle constellation walk's momentum didn't decrease as it directly smashed into the wall of fire. The wall of fire that covered the sky was smashed into pieces with a loud bang, and sparks flew in all directions. An illusory dog paw appeared in the sky. Bufang calmly caught it. Then his true energy surged and directly entered the Black Turtle constellation walk. The originally black turtle constellation walk's veined patterns suddenly flickered with light. The Serpent Man's supreme being flicked his long tongue. True energy surged as he smacked his palm toward the Black Turtle constellation walk. Without the quasi-divine weapon, this human was just an ant that could be squashed to death easily. The Supreme Serpent Man let out a sharp roar with a malevolent expression. The majestic fire seemed to have the power to start a prairie fire, pouring down on Bufang. This human in front of him did not put him, a supreme being, in his eyes at all. How arrogant and reckless was this? At this moment, his desire to kill Bufang had reached its peak. A suppressed rumbling sound came whistling over. This little serpent man really had guts. This time, he raised his dog paw again. Could he even slap a supreme being to death? Blackie grinned, revealing his spotlessly white canine teeth, and let out a gentle and magnetic male voice. Then, facing the Supreme Serpent Man's supreme being, he smashed the Black Turtle constellation walk, which had shrunk to the size of a plate. The Supreme Serpent Man, supreme being, felt as if his palm had smashed into a towering mountain, unable to budge it in the slightest. He was greatly alarmed. Beside him, An was so frightened that his serpent tail turned limp and his whole body was trembling. They knew that there was no way to resolve this matter peacefully. Opening his mouth, the 10,000 bestial flames, which had swallowed the scarlet spirit flame, darted into Bufang's mouth and was swallowed. The pressure emitted by a supreme being was not something he could withstand. He transformed into a towering wall of fire, intending to block the Black Turtle constellation walk. After all, he was a 7th grade battle saint. To be able to do so, he relied on the god of cooking Set and the heaven and earth obsidian flames. In front of a supreme being, an ordinary 7th grade battle saint would be slapped to death with a casual wave of his hand. This human actually dared to swallow his spirit flame. This was no different from peeling off his serpent scales. Last time, this black dog raised its paw and killed several 8th grade war gods with a single paw. Damn it, my spirit flame. Suddenly, a golden flame gushed out from his mouth. It really is a semi-divine tool. The Supreme Serpent Man, supreme being, looked at the Black Turtle constellation walk in the sky, and his eyes suddenly revealed a trace of greed. With a long howl, the true energy on his body rose steadily, and scarlet flames suddenly gushed out from his serpent scales. The spear that was swung at the black dog was directly bent by this pressure. What kind of flame was that? Why was it so domineering? At this moment, Yu Feng and An, who were not far away, suddenly trembled violently. Their faces were filled with fear as they looked at Blackie, who had raised his doggy paw. They remembered it clearly. Before that, he had to deal with this arrogant human in front of him. Bufang looked at the scene indifferently. He was too lazy to continue controlling the Black Turtle constellation walk. He just watched as the flames covered the Black Turtle constellation walk in layers. Greed instantly drowned the mind of the Serpent Man sovereign. At this moment, he also went all out. The Serpent Man sovereign immediately burst into laughter, feeling extremely carefree in his heart. He never thought that he would be able to reap such a huge harvest on this trip. Once his spirit fire erases the will on this semi-divine tool, this semi-divine tool will belong to him. In that instant, the Serpent Man sovereign felt a boundless pressure that caused the scales on his body to stand on end. The pressure had no effect on Bufang at all. It was just that the wind brought about by the pressure blew at Bu Fong's hair, causing it to whistle in the wind. How could Owner Bu be so calm at this time? The Serpent Man Sovereign stood proudly in the sky and looked down at Bu Fong. His eyes were filled with killing intent. The scorching temperature instantly filled the entire area. The golden flames swayed and floated in front of Bu Fong. A sharp and unwilling roar came out of the Serpent Man Sovereign's mouth. The Serpent Man Sovereign's heart trembled, and he was dumbfounded. Lord, this Owner Bu is my benefactor. He is also Yu Fu's benefactor. Can you let him go? When this voice came out, the Serpent Man Sovereign, who was rushing over, was startled. What the hell? This dog could actually speak? So, you're the owner of the store that Her Highness Yu Fu can't forget? You have come at the right time. Let me kill you and fulfill Her Highness Yu Fu's wish. Then, she can focus more on the inheritance of our grand serpentine city. The Serpent Man Sovereign's eyes slightly shrank. Then, the corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a cold smile. As the Serpent Man Sovereign spoke, he stuck out his scarlet tongue. The aura on his body also became more and more intense. This scarlet flame was a kind of spirit flame that the Serpent Man Sovereign obtained in the illusory spirit swamp. Although it was not as powerful as the alchemic fire or the heaven and earth obsidian flame, its power was many times stronger than ordinary flames. Say no more. I have already decided to kill this person, the Serpent Man Sovereign said coldly, directly interrupting Yu Feng, who was about to plead for mercy for Bu Fong. This was his spirit flame, and it was actually swallowed alive. The Serpent Man Sovereign's pressure made I and the others' faces turn pale. Blacka looked at the calm Bu Fong and immediately rolled his eyes. He knew that this kid was going to trouble the Lord Go. Bu Fong actually killed an elder of the Serpent Men tribe in front of him. Moreover, that elder was the one who called him over. The spirit flame that burst out from the Serpent Man Sovereign's scales, when faced with the golden flame, was completely defeated. In an instant, it collapsed and was forcefully swallowed by the golden flame. However, very quickly, the tears that were almost forced out of his eyes were squeezed back with a swoosh. His eyes were wide open, filled with disbelief, and I almost cried in his heart. The Serpent Man Sovereign's heart was bleeding. With a clang, the black spear hit the black turtle constellation walk and was sent flying. Blackus snorted and raised its dainty dog paw. The black turtle constellation walk spun and instantly broke free from the fire snake's restraint, returning to Bu Fong's side. In an instant, the wall of fire turned into a fire snake and wrapped around the black turtle constellation walk. It actually stopped the black turtle constellation walk from moving forward. Blackus took a few lazy cat-like steps and blocked in front of the Serpent Man Sovereign. Roar! The Serpent Man Sovereign's surging waves of energy caused his fur to billow. However, in the next moment he saw the calm Bu Fong. He saw a trace of mockery flash in Bu Fong's eyes bang. Then, the Serpent Man, Supreme Being, swung his tail in the air. In an instant, boundless true energy surged out of his body and turned into a pressure that seemed to be able to freeze. It pressed down on Bu Fong. Retrieving the 10,000 bestial flames, Bu Fong sighed inwardly. The 10,000 bestial flames was a heaven and earth obsidian flame with boundless power. Unfortunately, he couldn't control it at all. Could that golden flame be alchemic fire? What was the background of this human brat? He actually possessed alchemic fire. The black turtle constellation walk shrank and flew back into Bu Fong's hand. Holding the black turtle constellation walk, Bu Fong calmly looked at the Serpent Man Sovereign who was charging toward him. What is this thing? Is it a semi-divine tool? Do you expect a fat dog to save you? You've exhausted all your tricks. Damned human. The Serpent Man Sovereign's face was ferocious as he roared. His murderous intent almost solidified. There wasn't the slightest trace of fear in his eyes. He was as calm as the surface of a pond without the slightest ripple. This was an all-out attack due to his embarrassment and anger. When Blackie heard this, he was instantly displeased. What did he mean by counting on a fat dog? Were you looking down on your Lord Go? Ani's heart was filled with despair. The Serpent Man Sovereign's crimson tail swayed slightly, stirring up a wave of energy in the air. A slightly scorching sensation permeated the surroundings, causing the pores on one's body to open up involuntarily. However, Bufang wasn't worried because he wasn't fighting alone. After all, Bufang's cultivation was only at the 7th grade. The Serpent Man Sovereign's walk was directly smacked away. Damn it! Go to hell. The speed of the walk was extremely fast. The air seemed to be collapsing under the pressure of the walk. If he could obtain this semi-divine tool, his combat prowess would definitely reach a new height. Bufang's face suddenly flushed red. Then he opened his mouth. The Serpent Man Sovereign's body trembled. His serpentine pupils shrank as his entire body was sent flying far away in the air. However, the Serpent Man Sovereign's surprise only lasted for a moment. In the next moment, the long spear wrapped with a sharp energy swept toward Blackie. If he wanted to truly fight against the Serpent Man Sovereign, the current Bufang couldn't do it. His mind trembled. The phantom dog's paw fiercely slapped down on him. The black turtle constellation walk flew back to Bufang's hand and floated above his palm. Bufang slightly raised his eyes and looked at the Serpent Man Sovereign who was hovering in the sky. This power was extremely terrifying. Chapter 384. The Limp Serpent Man's Supreme Being was being dragged by Bufang, not showing any signs of moving at all. It was as if he was already dead. These sea spirit beasts followed the waves and surged toward the illusory spirit swamp. He originally thought that Bufang was stronger than the Grand Serpentine City. Who would have thought that Owner Boo's resources were not any weaker than the Grand Serpentine Cities? The Serpent Man's Supreme Being's eyes suddenly shrank when he saw a figure appear in front of him. Dark clouds seemed to roll in from the horizon, covering the sky and the sun. Bufang dragged the unconscious Serpent Man Supreme Being up from the ground. He grabbed the Serpent Man's tail and turned to look at Eye. The Supreme Being expert of the Grand Serpentine City was actually vomited blood by a dog's paw. Let's go. You lead the way. Bufang looked at Eye. His expression softened as he said. Even the Serpent Men, who often roamed the seas, had never seen a 100-meter-tall giant wave before. As the waves rolled, the gold shone brilliantly. Eye was the most excited among the crowd. He looked at Bufang with excitement and admiration. Holding the black turtle constellation walk, Bufang exhaled softly. Then he stomped on the ground with the tip of his foot, causing the mud on the ground to splatter everywhere. Terrifying energy gathered in the air and formed the phantom of a dog's paw. Yufeng's face was extremely unsightly. He opened his mouth and said, Owner Boo at Bufang's figure moved. He stomped on the ground and his body shot out. He had seen how terrifying this black walk was. Even a Supreme Being expert couldn't send it flying. It was enough to show how powerful it was. Yufeng's bloodshot eyes widened, and his whole body trembled violently. After all, Bufang was a human. Even though the Serpent Man was half a snake, he was still a human. Oh my God. What happened? What happened just now? Bufang really couldn't do something as insane as eating people. Don't talk. If you say another word, I'm afraid I won't be able to stop myself from knocking you out. Compared to the Grand Serpentine City, what did Owner Boo have to fear? From time to time, there would be Naga Guard from Grand Serpentine City patrolling the area with weapons in their hands. They were responsible for the port's safety. Bang! This stone tower was built by the Grand Serpentine City. It was used as a watchtower to observe the waves of the vast ocean. The Naga's supremacy was directly pressed to the ground. Her entire body sunk deep into the swamp. Bufang grabbed the Serpent Man's Supreme Being's tail and followed on knees figure slowly. Bufang held the black turtle constellation walk in one hand and looked at him expressionlessly. Then he swung the black walk down and ruthlessly smashed the head of the Serpent Man Supreme Being. Dong below the precipitous cliff was a boundless ocean with surging waves. This familiar feeling of fear. That's right. This black dog was indeed that terrifying black dog. Its green tail swayed in the air, and its head of green hair spread out in a sinister manner. This doomsday-like scene caused the serpent men on the wooden ships to roar in fear. One after another, they leaped out of the ships and madly ran toward the shore. The serpent man supreme being let out a shrill cry. Many wooden ships anchored in the harbor. Their sails swayed, emitting a loud, crashing sound. This sound was deafening, and it caused people's minds to tremble involuntarily. Rumble. Then a huge dog paw print appeared on the ground. Crushed stones flew everywhere, and the stinky swamp mud surged out, making the surroundings extremely filthy. His entire body shivered, and cold sweat trickled down his back. He even dared to eat a supreme being. What else did Ownerwood not dare to eat? The surrounding serpent men experts were instantly dumbfounded. Why did such a terrifying pressure appear? If it weren't for the weak breathing, which proved that he was still alive, the crowd would have thought that a supreme being was smashed to death by a black walk. The ground of the serpent men tribe, which wasn't very sturdy to begin with, was directly smashed to pieces. The swamp mud beneath it splashed up into the sky. The faint, warm sunlight shone down from the heavens, shining on the clear and crystalline surface of the sea. It was like crumbled gold scattered all over the ground. However, he didn't know that his action almost caused Yu Feng's heart to soften. The serpent men on the wooden ships all sprawled on the deck in fear, looking at the pitch-black horizon in the distance. And the target of Bu Feng's black turtle constellation walk was precisely this 8th grade war god. Monstrous waves rolled over, stirring up thousands of gales. The sea wind whistled, and the dark clouds slowly shrouded the illusory spirit swamp. Yu Feng suddenly felt a tinge of regret. He felt that he had made an extremely foolish decision. Now, this walk actually wanted to smash him without any warning. How could he not be scared to death? The Supreme Being's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. His whole body slumped to the ground, unable to crawl back up. The heavy black turtle constellation walk displayed its terrifying might. Bu Feng didn't say anything. With a thought, the black turtle constellation walk flew toward the serpent men experts who came with the Supreme Being. This village was only a temporary base for them, a place to stay in the sea. Their houses were actually located in the Grand Serpentine City. Those were ferocious eyes. Within the several hundred-meter-tall waves, there were actually many powerful sea spirit beasts. Because the sea was full of unknowns, some unknown sea spirit beasts would occasionally crawl out of the sea and cause harm to the village and the harbor. These guards were formed to deal with these sea spirit beasts. Along with the unceasing rolling of the horizon, a tyrannical roar resounded. The black turtle constellation walk floated above Bu Feng's palm. His emotionless gaze swept over the frightened serpent men. Blackie rolled its eyes, seemingly bored. Then, with a wave of its paw, the ground seemed to be overturned by its paw. The Supreme Being's complexion became extremely frightened. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He let out a long howl as he tried to break free from the shackles. Were their eyes playing tricks on them, or was this Supreme Being expert a fake? Do you know where the Grand Serpentine City is? Do you know where Yu Fu is? How is this possible? He grabbed the black turtle constellation walk with one hand and ferociously smacked the 8th grade war god Serpent Man's head. With a dull thud, the 8th grade war god Serpent Man was struck dumb. His head was filled with stars as he fainted. The ground seemed to suddenly tremble. In the west of the illusory spirit swamp, the Supreme Being's complexion was ferocious. He crazily roared, as if he was about to go crazy. His scarlet tail swayed unceasingly as he tried to break free from the frightening energy. Most of these serpent men were 7th grade battle saints. Among them, there was an 8th grade war god, a black dog that could even kill a Supreme Being with a single swipe of his paw. And I nodded. She glanced at the Supreme Being's serpent man and sucked in a breath of air. She grinned, twisted her waist, and crawled forward. Her beautiful eyes gazed into the distance. She could vaguely see the silhouette within the waves. She sucked in a breath of air, and her towering chest heaved up and down. Swoosh! Swoosh. Rumble. Boom. It's a pity that he's a serpent man. If he didn't have a human body, he would probably be a delicious supreme being ingredient. Then, amidst the swirling swamp, a serpent man's silhouette was directly smacked away. He shot out explosively and landed on the ground. On top of the cliff, there was a huge stone tower. A fishy and salty sea breeze blew past, bringing with it a vast smell. As the waves surged, they crashed against the reefs under the cliff and let out thunderous sounds. Streaks of red light flickered from the waves, as if they were shooting out beams of light. With such a frightening dog here, and the iron lump puppet that had yet to appear, was this really a dog's paw? With the harbor as the center, a small village was formed. However, this village was actually inhabited by serpent men fishermen who were preparing to go to the sea. Damned human! The supreme being opened his mouth, revealing his sharp fangs, and bellowed at Buffon. However, the exquisite dog's paw continued to exert force. Like the sound of bones breaking, the supreme being's shriek came to an abrupt end. She coughed out blood, and her body fell limply onto the ground. The serpent men elders who were waiting to see Buffong's miserable end all fell limply onto the ground. They looked at the plump dog, and then at the expressionless Buffon. The serpent men expert who tried to defend hastily bent his arm, and the black walk smashed into his head, sending him flying. Could it be that the oceanic species experts want to invade our illusory spirit swamp? Why is this happening? The war god expert was still immersed in blackest terror and had yet to regain his senses. He suddenly turned his head, only to discover that a black walk was silently smashing toward him. At the bottom of the cliff was a huge harbor. Many experts of the Serpent People tribe would enter the sea from there to capture food ingredients in the sea and obtain some ingredients. This Ownerbu actually planned to eat the Supreme Being? And I was taken aback for a moment, and then a divine light shot out from his eyes. I know, Ownerbu, I will bring you there now. Buffon picked up the Supreme Being's limp scarlet tail and looked at it. In the end, he let out a sigh, and, with a smack, he threw the tail away. Ignoring the other Serpent Men experts, Buffon swept a glance at the Serpent Men tribe's elders. The elders who were clamoring a moment ago suddenly did not even dare to breathe loudly. They lowered their heads and did not even dare to let out a fart. An air-piercing sound rang out, and a beautiful figure glided down from the sky, floating in the air. His figure burst out and appeared in front of the Supreme Being, who was struggling to crawl up from the ground. His long spear was actually bent by a terrifying force and was on the verge of breaking. However, Black's mouth twitched and it snorted in disdain. Its paw continued to press down. After doing all this, Blackie opened its doggy mouth, and, as if it was yawning, it took lazy cat-like steps back to Buffon's side. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, and their minds trembled violently, as if their hearts were about to jump out of their chests. The Serpent Man war god, who hurriedly waved his arm to smash the black walk away, suddenly slapped his palm on the black turtle constellation walk. A solemn expression appeared on the serpentine sovereign's beautiful face. Looking at the several hundred-meter-tall waves surging toward them, her heart felt somewhat stifled. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. Buffon indifferently glanced at Serpent Man Yufeng and indifferently said. He waved the black turtle constellation walk in his hand, and it scared Yufeng so much that he swallowed back the words he was about to say. All of a sudden, a sharp cry of alarm came from the Serpent Man, who was preparing to leave. Chapter 385. The Oceanic Tribe was one of the races living in the vast ocean. It was formed by the evolution of numerous sea spirit beasts, which gave birth to intelligence. There were many different kinds of sea spirit beasts, and they all had different appearances. When so many races came together, they were known as the Oceanic Tribe. The Oceanic Tribe was extremely powerful. After all, they controlled the vast ocean. Compared to the creatures on land, they were much more valiant. The Serpentine sovereign naturally knew about the existence of the oceanic tribe. She held them in awe. Even though her strength had reached the peak of the Supreme Being realm, she knew that the oceanic tribe definitely had experts who had broken through the shackles of the Supreme Being realm. Originally, she planned to enter the boundless ocean after dealing with the matters in the Grand Serpentine City. She wanted to find an opportunity to break through. At that time, she would need to come into contact with the oceanic tribe. However, things always inadvertently exceeded her expectations. Hidden within the towering waves were numerous sea spirit beasts. The eyes of these sea spirit beasts were filled with brutality. They didn't have the slightest bit of benevolence. It was obvious that the experts in the ocean didn't come with good intentions. What are they doing here? Why would the oceanic tribe suddenly attack my illusory spirit swamp? The Serpentine sovereign furrowed her brows. If the towering waves hit the ground, the first target of the sea spirit beasts would be the Grand Serpentine City. Even though the Grand Serpentine City was powerful, it was still a little difficult to deal with so many sea spirit beasts. The Serpentine sovereign felt a headache coming on. She still couldn't understand why the sea spirit beasts would invade their illusory spirit swamp. Compared to the vast resources in the ocean, the illusory spirit swamp had nothing that could attract the experts of the oceanic tribe in the ocean. All of a sudden, the Serpentine sovereign's heart shook. Could it be a crystal mine that had just been excavated? But how could a mere crystal mine attract the experts of the oceanic tribe to attack the illusory spirit swamp? Could it be that there is some treasure in the crystal mine? A pensive expression appeared on the Serpentine sovereign's beautiful face. In the torrential waves in the distance, a massive fish opened its mouth, and there were several blue-skinned silhouettes standing in its mouth. These figures looked at the precipitous cliff from afar with cold expressions. The Serpentine sovereign's gaze seemed to pierce through the void, meeting the gaze of the expert in the mouth of the giant fish. The Serpentine sovereign sucked in a breath of cold air. She discovered that among the blue-skinned experts in the mouth of the giant fish, there were actually quite a few Supreme Being auras among them. Even though the Serpentine sovereign was far away, she could not help but feel her heart tremble. Damn it! The Serpentine sovereign cursed under her breath. A trace of anxiety appeared on her beautiful face. Then, with a swing of her serpentine tail, she suddenly soared into the sky and flew toward the Grand Serpentine City. As she flew, she took out a white sword talisman. The Serpentine sovereign bit her red lips as she looked at the white cloud pattern on the sword talisman. Her face was filled with hesitation. In the end, he seemed to have thought of something, and he sighed leisurely and crushed the sword talisman. The White Cloud Villa stood in the depths of the illusory spirit swamp. Amidst the fluttering white clouds, a luxurious villa stood tall. Within the villa, there were pavilions, terraces and pavilions, small bridges, and flowing water. Dense spiritual energy surrounded the villa, making it seem like a paradise. In a small house, a figure who was sitting cross-legged suddenly opened his eyes. Wu Mu's eyes were filled with sword energy. His brows slightly furrowed as he turned his head in the direction of the Grand Serpentine City. The sword talisman was crushed. Is Dooley calling for me? Did she meet with some kind of crisis? Wu Mu stood up, his breath slightly fluctuating. Ever since he returned from the Light Wind Imperial City, he had been in seclusion to recuperate. Even though his physical injuries were mostly healed after he drank a bowl of soup in the store, the Shurasect Overlord's shattered sword intent had caused the spirit to suffer a heavy blow. Even though the soup was miraculous, it was still difficult for him to recover from his mental injuries. A light green longsword whizzed out from his back, and the door to the house suddenly opened. Wu Mu stepped on the flying sword and immediately shot out. Within the White Cloud Villa, a few people's auras also rose up. Then, several figures stepped on flying swords and appeared in the air. They looked at Wu Mu in confusion. Wu Mu didn't say anything and only gave a few instructions. Then, with his hands clasped behind his back, he elegantly stepped on the flying sword and flew out of the villa. After Wu Mu left the villa, within the villa, Wu Yunbai, who was bored to death and was strolling around, suddenly had her eyes lit up. She looked at the place where her father had left and narrowed her eyes. In the next moment, she stealthily ran out of the white cloud villa. The Grand Serpentine City was majestic. Its city walls were even taller than the Light Wind Empire's imperial city. The bricks used to build the city walls were also extremely sturdy. Moreover, there seemed to be a mysterious magic array engraved on the city walls that protected it from being destroyed. Above the city walls, there were serpent men guards clad in armor patrolling the area. They were the guardians of the Grand Serpentine City. All of a sudden, the pupils of the guards on the city walls shrank as they brandished their spears and aimed at a distant place. In that direction, two figures slowly emerged from the miasma that pervaded the air. One of them was a serpent man, while the other was a human. That was because humans walked on two legs, which was clearly different from serpent men. Why would a human come to the Grand Serpentine City? What was he trying to do? Wait, hiss. The guards on the city walls immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Their pupils shrank as they looked at the serpent tail in the human's hand. The scarlet tail was connected to a serpent man who was being dragged like a dead dog. That's Serpent King Doom. How? How did he become like this? Below the Serpentine Sovereign was the Serpentine King. There were 3 Serpentine Kings in the Grand Serpentine City, and each of them had the strength of a supreme being. A supreme being Serpentine King was being dragged like a dead dog. How could they not be shocked? Enemy attack. The guards who came to their senses immediately let out roars of rage. The densely packed guards on the city walls defended the city so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. A serpent man, who seemed to be the commander, coldly stared at the slowly approaching Buffon. "Sir, please stop. Put down Serpent King Doom and leave the Grand Serpentine City. Otherwise, the experts of the Grand Serpentine City will attack and kill you." Buffon slowly raised his head and narrowed his eyes. Through the miasma, he saw a large group of serpent men standing on the majestic city walls. The serpent men all emitted murderous intent, and their target was Buffon. Numerous icy cold spears were waiting to be shot out. As long as Buffon took another step forward, those sharp spears would be hurled down one after another. "All right, you should leave first. Don't get involved." Buffon turned his head and looked at Ah-In-I, indicating for him to leave first. Ani's expression slightly changed, but after thinking about it, he didn't refuse. The army of the Grand Serpentine City was much stronger than the army of the Light Wind Empire. Facing a human who was suspected to have beaten the supreme being Serpentine King into a dead dog, they actually didn't retreat. Although it was because they had the Serpentine Sovereign to rely on, at least they were more courageous than the human army. After all, they were the elite troops of the Serpentine Sovereign, and they were able to kill their way out of the illusory spirit swamp. "Hand over you Fu, and I will let this guy go," Buffon said calmly, waving the serpent's tail in his hand. His voice wasn't loud, but it spread out, and the serpent men on the city walls heard it clearly. The expressions of the serpent men on the city walls changed, and the way they looked at Buffon became more and more ferocious. This human's target was Her Highness Yu Fu, the future successor of the Grand Serpentine City. The future Serpentine Sovereign of the Grand Serpentine City. What a delusional human. Damn it. Inside a majestic castle in the Grand Serpentine City. In a sealed palace, serpent men with powerful cultivation bases stood in the main hall, guarding a beautiful serpent man in the middle of the hall. Yu Fu's complexion was somewhat haggard, and her hands were bound by an ice-cold chain. Her movements were restricted within the palace. She felt somewhat sorrowful in her heart. She didn't expect that after returning to the Serpent Men tribe and participating in a tribal gathering, she would become the successor of the Serpentine Sovereign. Compared to becoming the successor of the Serpentine Sovereign, she hoped to become Owner Boo's apprentice more. Every day, she would wake up early to practice her knife techniques, learn how to carve, cook dishes that emitted an alluring fragrance, and savor her own cooking skills. She originally thought that the Serpentine Sovereign would respect her opinion, but she didn't expect that she would be rejected by the Serpentine Sovereign when she told him about it. She was even imprisoned here. Thinking about how she would never be able to return to Fong Fong's little store to learn how to cook, Yu Fu couldn't hide the sorrow in her heart. The palace's gate suddenly opened. A beautiful figure whizzed through the gate and landed in the center of the palace. It was the noble and elegant Serpentine sovereign. Her green hair was draped over her shoulders, and her graceful figure swayed as she came to Yu Fu's side. Her beautiful eyes fell on Yu Fu, and there was a hint of coldness and pity in them. Why do you have to do this? Becoming my successor is the dream of many serpent men. Why are you so stubborn? Yu Fu pouted and looked at the Serpentine sovereign pitifully, as if she wanted to beg the Serpentine sovereign to let her go. If you didn't have the physique and talent to become the Serpentine sovereign, I naturally wouldn't stop you. However, with your physique and talent, you are destined to inherit my mantle. I will soon leave the Grand Serpentine City, and the city cannot be without a ruler for even a day. This is your mission, and this is your destiny. Even if you don't want to accept it, you have to accept it. In the past, this was the same for me. The Serpentine sovereign stretched out her slender and delicate hand. Her fair and slender palm was like a beautiful jade, and as it caressed Yu Fu's face, a trace of nostalgia and sorrow appeared on her beautiful face. Yu Fu's complexion turned pale, and she couldn't hide the sorrow in her heart. Suddenly, the palace's gate was opened. A serpent man guard rushed into the palace in a panic and reported respectfully to the Serpentine sovereign. Reporting. Your Majesty, there is a human outside the city holding Serpentine King Du Mu's body, and he wants to kill his way into the city. The Serpentine sovereign's hand that was caressing Yu Fu's cheek suddenly froze, and her expression turned ice cold. She turned her head to look at the guard and said indifferently, Serpentine King Du Mu? Didn't he go to Yu Fu's tribe? Why is his body being held by a human? Pass down my order. Ask the other 2 Serpentine kings to capture that human for me. How dare he humiliate the Serpentine King of the Grand Serpentine City? Her ice-cold voice reverberated in the palace. Yu Fu was a little stunned. A human had killed his way into her tribe. Could it be? Honorbu. Chapter 386. After the Serpentine sovereign gave the order, a majestic aura gushed out from the 2 luxuriously decorated mansions in the Serpentman City. 2 beams of vital energy shot up into the sky, and 2 serpentmen emerged from it, standing proudly in the sky. The aura exuding from these 2 serpentmen was extremely frightening. The air seemed to rumble and tremble as they moved. They were the 2 Serpentine kings, the supreme being experts of the Grand Serpentman City. The 2 of them looked at each other from afar and saw the iciness in each other's eyes. One of them was a serpent man. His upper body was that of a human, and his muscles were like those of a horned dragon. His skin was covered with blue vein patterns. His eyes were like lightning, as if they were shooting out lightning bolts. Sizzling blue lightning arcs shuttled around his body, illuminating his blue serpent tail. This was the Serpentine King of the Grand Serpentman City, a mid-stage, supreme being expert, Du Kai. The other Serpentine King was also a snake woman. She had a slender and alluring waist, and there was a purple cloth wrapped around her chest, covering her ample bosom. On her exquisite face, there was a seductive look in her eyes. Her purple hair fluttered in the wind, and her purple serpent tail swayed in the air. This person was the last Serpentine King of the Grand Serpentman City, a late-stage supreme being expert, Du Wei. Among the 3 Serpentine kings, Du Mu was the weakest. This was also the reason why the Serpentine sovereign trusted the 2 Serpentine kings to take action. Moreover, the Grand Serpentine City did not only have these 3 Serpentine kings. The Grand Serpentman City was bordered by the vast ocean to the west and the White Cloud Villa to the east. Moreover, it was overseen by the illusory Spirit Swamp. Without such a strong foundation, it would be difficult for the Grand Serpentman City to remain intact. The 2 Serpentmen kings swung their tails, then suddenly shot out of the void and rapidly sped out of the city. The Serpentine sovereign clasped her hands behind her back. Her eyes were like lightning as she coiled her serpent tail and stood in front of the main hall. Her brows were tightly furrowed, and a trace of melancholy appeared on her face. She was not worried about the human who wanted to attack the Grand Serpentmen City. How could a human understand the Grand Serpentmen City's foundation? If a mere human was able to break into the Grand Serpentine City, it would have long been erased from the illusory spirit swamp. Right now, she was worried about the 100-meter-tall waves that were rolling towards her from the vast ocean. She was worried about the countless sea spirit beasts hidden within the waves, as well as the oceanic species experts who were riding the waves. Compared to the ignorant humans, the experts of the oceanic tribe were a bigger headache for her. They could even threaten the survival of the Grand Serpentine City. Bufong exhaled softly. It continued to drag its scarlet tail behind it as it walked toward the Grand Serpentman City step by step. His face was expressionless as he stared at the large group of snake people on the towering city wall. At this moment, the gates of the Grand Serpentman City were slowly closing up. The sound of chains being pulled could be heard as the gates, which are made of metal, were slowly being pulled up. The gates were about to be sealed shut. The leader of the Naga guards roared at Bufong, telling him to stop. However, Bufong did not care and continued walking forward. The Serpent King, Du Mu, fell to the ground like a dead dog as he was dragged by Bufong. The guards on the city wall were so angry that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. However, at the same time, they were also frightened. After all, Du Mu was a supreme being expert. Serpent men battle spears. Shoot! As Bufong took a step forward, the roar of the leader of the guards on the city wall resounded in his ears. The pupils of the Serpent Men guards on the city wall shrank. Then they all revealed their hideous fangs. True energy surged in their hands, and sharp spears emitted an ice-cold glint as they were shot down from the city wall. Bufong raised his head and looked at the sky, which had turned pitch black due to the numerous spears. He squinted his eyes. With a thought, a wisp of black smoke curled up and the black turtle constellation Wok floated in the air. As true energy surged in, the black turtle constellation Wok expanded rapidly. Then it hovered above Bufong's head and fell down, protecting Bufong's figure. Swoosh! Swoosh! The numerous spears were hurled down with the sound of breaking the air. They covered the sky and covered the sun, turning it pitch black. All the Serpent Men held their breaths. Suddenly, the eyes of the leader of the Serpent Men guard shrank. He saw the long spears collide with something solid, making a clanking sound. Faint sparks spread out. The long spears that filled the sky were all blocked. A huge black wok floated in front of them. The black wok, which had been hit by countless long spears, was not damaged at all. There was not a single mark left on it. What was this thing? The leader of the Serpent Man guards sucked in a breath of cold air. The hair on his body stood on end. As expected of a human who could defeat the Serpent King Du Mu. He was indeed extraordinary. Rip! In the sky, a tall and sturdy Serpent Man flew over. It was a Serpent Man whose body flickered with light blue electric arcs. With a sizzling sound, a lightning-long blade was caught in the Serpent Man's hand. The graceful Serpentine King, Du Wei, arrived. She gently landed in the middle of the Serpentine guards. Her seductive eyes were looking at the human below with interest. A smile appeared on her peerlessly beautiful face. Then, she gently snapped her fingers, turned to look at the Serpent Man guard, and said in a soft voice, "Open the great formation guarding the city gate. Give this human a big present." The leader of the Serpent Man guards shrank his eyes. He looked at Serpent Man King Du Wei in surprise. Could the Serpent Man King be serious? Open up a formation. Big Sister wants to play with this human. Du Wei raised her slender finger. Her seductive red lips parted, and her small tongue stuck out. She licked her finger and smiled. The leader of the Serpent Man guards instantly shivered. He ran away as fast as he could. In a short while, the top of the city wall flickered. On the city wall in front of Du Wei, a beam of light appeared. Then, a magic array that was formed by two arrays intertwined with each other appeared. Serpentine King Du Wei's slender palm pressed against the formation. Immediately, the two opposite rotating formations began to rotate faster and faster. A white ball of light gathered in front of the magic array. Boom! A loud explosion sounded. That Serpent King, Du Kai, was taken aback for a moment. Then his hair was blown up by a gust of wind. The corner of Du Kai's mouth twitched. He turned his head and saw Du Wei leaning against the city wall. Her chest was constantly jiggling. That prodigal woman was laughing like a flower. Was this city-guarding magic array for fun? Du Kai's heart was filled with anger. With a loud explosion, Bufang furrowed his brows as he looked at the ball of light that was rapidly flying toward him. His heart couldn't help but shiver. This ball of light gave him a strong sense of danger. With a thought, the black turtle constellation walk suddenly revolved. It once again turned upside down to protect him. The ball of light ruthlessly smashed onto the black turtle constellation walk. With a loud bang, Bufang felt his eardrums tremble. His vision turned black. The power of a mere ball of light was actually so frightening. This is an array cannon. I didn't think that a city in this remote place would have this kind of thing, even though this array cannon is very outdated. Black's magnetic voice resounded. It seemed to be explaining something to Bufang. It raised its eyes and glanced at Bufang, who was still in a daze after being bombarded by the cannons. It couldn't help but twitch its mouth. Array cannon? What the hell? The black turtle constellation walk shrunk and floated above Bufang's palm. He still felt a little dizzy. The explosive power of the ball of light was very strong. Moreover, the aftermath of the explosion also made Bufang feel a little dizzy. On the city wall, Du Wei's red lips slightly parted. Her eyes were filled with astonishment. This human really has some tricks up his sleeves. He can even block the array cannon, as expected of the person who can deal with Du Mu. He's worthy of this sister's help. Du Wei licked her red lips with her small tongue and smiled charmingly. In the sky, Du Kai's eyes narrowed. He let out a roar. His voice exploded like thunder. Rumble. A frightening aura instantly filled the air. Bufang's heart shuddered. This serpent man's aura was much stronger than Du Mu's. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Du Kai glanced at Bufang. He realized that Bufang's cultivation level was only a 7th grade battle saint. He suddenly felt a little puzzled. An expert who could deal with Du Mu? Could it be that he was only a 7th grade battle saint? Du Mu, this fellow, was really regressing the more he cultivated. A several hundred-meter-long thunder blade shot out from the hands of the Serpent Man King Du Kai, who was floating in the sky, and slashed at Bufang. The blade slashed through the air with crackling sounds, causing many serpent men to feel awe. This was the Serpent Man King, the incomparably powerful Serpent Man King. Bufang's brows furrowed. He held the black turtle constellation walk with one hand, and his chest expanded. Then his face suddenly flushed red, and a golden flame gushed out from his mouth. Once the heaven and earth obsidian flame appeared, the temperature immediately rose. The flame gushed out and collided with the thunderblade. Instantly, they collided with each other. Du Kai's pupils shrank. He exclaimed inwardly, "What a powerful flame!" No wonder Du Mu was dealt with. After all, among the 3 Serpent Men Kings, only Du Mu plays with fire. However, compared to the flame of this human in front of him, Du Mu's flame was more than a level lower. But even so what? The corners of Du Kai's mouth curled up, revealing his sharp fangs. The thunder in his hand flourished, and the thunder blade swung again. It actually turned into a ferocious thunder snake that coiled around its body. It dodged the mystic flame and pounced at Bufang. Compared to a supreme being expert, Bufang's cultivation was still much weaker. Blackish strode forward with its lazy, cat-like steps, its dainty doggy paw slightly raised, and the phantom of a doggy paw suddenly rushed out. Boom! Bufang retracted the heaven and earth obsidian flame. Du Kai's thunder snake was also caught by the doggy paw. With a sudden pull, Du Kai, who was in the sky, slightly staggered. In the next moment, under the dumbfounded gazes of all the serpent men, the fat dog that caught the thunder snake casually waved its hand and stuffed the thunder snake into its mouth. What the F asterisk CK? You even want to eat thunder? Aren't you afraid of being electrocuted to death? Du Kai's heart jumped, and Du Wei's charming eyes widened. The two supreme beings of the Serpent Men's city were both shocked. Chapter 387. In the sky above the illusory spirit swamp, a metallic warship rumbled as it slowly sped through the sky, stirring up a violent gust of wind. As the wind blew, the water in the swamp splashed in all directions. Swamp mud swirled in the air as a fishy stench filled the air. This was an extremely majestic warship that floated in the sky. On the deck of the warship, a figure stood upright. A powerful aura emanated from his body, as if he wanted to pull in the heavens and earth. Within the illusory spirit swamp, swamp mud would occasionally be sent flying. Spirit beasts would be exposed and flee in a panic. There were even more ferocious 8th-grade spirit beasts that bared their fangs at the metal warship in the sky. However, when the eyes of the experts standing on the deck moved, the 8th-grade spirit beasts were frightened to the point that they let out a miserable wail and fled as if they were trying to flee. Executive Feng looked down at the illusory spirit swamp from above. The spirit swamp, which was extremely dangerous to the experts of the southern region, was incomparably safe to the experts of the Grand Baron sect. It couldn't even be considered a dangerous place. There wasn't even a divine physique echelon divine beast in the illusory spirit swamp. Naturally, the Grand Baron sect's experts wouldn't be too worried. The metal door of the warship emitted a heavy, creaking sound. Then, from within the cabin, many experts walked out. These were all disciples of the Grand Baron sect, and their auras were extremely powerful. An old man suddenly walked up to Executive Feng's side and whispered a few words. Executive Feng's expression, which had remained calm all this while, suddenly changed. His brows furrowed. You're saying that Liang Kai, one of the sect's 10 great sons of heaven, has found out about the existence of a heaven and earth obsidian flame in the training ground and is already on his way here. The elder solemnly nodded his head. Executive Feng's face immediately became a little ugly. He felt a little sinister. The Grand Baron sect's 10 great sons of heaven were all 10th grade divine echelon experts. Not only were they extremely talented, but their combat prowess was even more terrifying. Every one of them had their own trump cards and were extremely difficult to deal with. If a son of heaven came for the heaven and earth obsidian flame, then this heaven and earth obsidian flame might really have nothing to do with him. Moreover, if the geniuses found out that there was actually a big crystal mine in the training ground, he might even be robbed of his contribution. The competition within the Grand Baron sect was just as fierce. If one wanted cultivation resources, they had to fight for them themselves. Executive Feng took a deep breath. Then, his eyes narrowed, as though a ray of light was flashing past. Speed up the warships. We need to take down that big crystal mine as soon as possible. As for the heaven and earth obsidian flame, it was not his concern. Even if it was the weakest heaven's pride in the sect, Executive Feng might not be qualified to compete with him. Therefore, he could only strive to collect the Yuan crystal mine before the heaven's pride arrived and report it to the sect. Monstrous waves rolled over, covering the sky. As the waves rolled, they emitted a deafening sound, as if they were about to burst one's eardrums. As the waves got closer, the figures of some spirit beasts in the 100-meter-tall waves became more obvious. The ferocious and roaring sea spirit beasts carried a terrifying pressure as they charged toward the precipitous cliff. Numerous blue-skinned oceanic species experts walked on the waves, their gazes fixed on the illusory spirit swamp. Among them, there was an oceanic species expert with a mouth full of ferocious fangs. He was riding a spirit beast covered in sharp armor. It was a shrimp-type spirit beast with a vigorous aura. Its body was divided into many segments, and on its head were sharp fangs and 2 sickle-like claws. It had a pair of compound eyes that looked like handles and white foam spewed from its mouth as it steadily treaded on the waves. This was a supreme sea spirit beast, the deep-sea mantis prawn. It was several meters long and looked like an ancient, ferocious beast with a monstrous aura. Our oceanic species sage prophesied that the prawn ancestor will be born in the illusory spirit swamp. If we can find a prawn ancestor, our oceanic species will definitely be able to walk out of this narrow sea under the supreme might of the prawn ancestor and head toward the vast ocean. A blue-skinned expert riding on the back of the shrimp-type spirit beast opened his mouth full of sharp fangs. His gurgling eyes were filled with excitement. As if he had thought of something exciting, this oceanic species expert opened his cheeks, and seawater instantly gushed out from his cheeks. He let out a sharp roar that soared into the sky, causing the oceanic species experts on the huge waves to respond in unison. For a moment, the sharp roars connected together and soared into the sky. It was incomparably noisy. The precipitous cliff of the illusory spirit swamp gradually became clearer in the eyes of the oceanic species experts. Blackie curled his tongue and swallowed the light blue lightning. He grinned and seemed to be in a good mood. Buffon was also a little surprised. It turned out that the Lord Go had this hobby. He liked to eat lightning. It seemed like he was getting easier to feed. After Du Kai and Du Wei recovered from their shock, their hearts sank and their faces became incomparably grave. They looked at the black dog with much more caution. A mere 7th-grade battle saint was able to kill a supreme being expert and drag him along. He must have some kind of trump card. To be able to swallow a lightning bolt from a supreme being expert like Du Kai in one gulp, this black dog was very likely the opponent's trump card, the trump card that could kill Du Mu. Even though Du Mu's cultivation level was much weaker than theirs, Du Kai was still able to beat him like a dead dog, let alone Du Wei, who had a higher cultivation level. However, he did not dare to boast that he could swallow the lightning bolt in one gulp. Lightning was so violent that if he swallowed it, his stomach might explode. Du Wei swayed her serpent tail and soared into the sky from the city wall. She floated in the air and faced the grinning Blackie from afar. Her head, full of purple hair, fluttered in the wind. A smile appeared on her charming face, adding to her charm. The waves on her chest rose and fell, attracting the eyes. Under the restraint of the purple cloth, it seemed as if they were on the verge of bursting out. Interesting. Du Kai, why is your lightning so weak? You can't even deal with a dog? Du Wei raised her slender finger and smiled charmingly. Du Kai's eyes widened, and he shot a glance at Du Wei. The muscles on his body bulged, and his head of blue hair fluttered. More and more majestic lightning gathered on his body. It was as if his entire person had transformed into a bolt of lightning. With a sizzling sound, Du Kai once again threw out several lightning long knives. This time, the target of the long knives changed and went straight for the thunderbolt-swallowing fat dog. Blackie rolled its eyes. The densely packed lightning bolts that shot down made it snort in disdain. The taste of this lightning is too inferior. The texture is too bad. The Lord Go muttered in its heart. Then it narrowed its eyes and opened its mouth. The dog's mouth suddenly became bigger and bigger, as if it had transformed into a ferocious, bloody mouth. Facing the sky, full of lightning long knives, the Lord Go let out a deafening bark. Woof! It was like the roar of the heavens and the angry howl of a ferocious beast. Monstrous air waves surged out and rushed toward Du Kai. Before the sky, full of lightning long knives, could strike down, they were blown back by the dog's bark. Du Kai, who was floating in the air, suddenly narrowed his eyes. His body suddenly stiffened after the dog's bark. His mind trembled, and he couldn't move a single step. The thousands of lightning long knives flew back and slashed at his body. The immobilized Du Kai was ruthlessly slammed against the towering city wall, causing the city wall to shake. The sizzling lightning arcs scattered around Du Kai's body. A dog's bark defeated a supreme being expert. This dog did become a monster. Du Wei's pretty face froze again. Her alluring red lips parted in astonishment. When the dog's bark rang out, the Serpentine sovereign, who was deep in thought in the imperial palace, was shaken. She turned her head with a grave expression and looked outside the imperial palace. Her pupils shrank. The serpentine sovereign's heart skipped a beat when she heard the dog's bark. A bad premonition welled up in her heart. The source of the sound was outside the city. Could it be that Du Kai and Du Wei attacked at the same time? Could it be that the humans that she didn't care about had attacked the city? Yu Fu, who was chained in the resplendent imperial palace, heard the familiar dog's bark. Her beautiful eyes widened, and her pretty face revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. That's Black's bark. It really is Onarbu. In that instant, Yu Fu's heart was filled with joy. She couldn't help but feel like crying tears of joy. Outside the grand serpentine city, a long rainbow was speeding toward it. A figure stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He was elegantly riding on a sword. Suddenly, he heard a dog's bark coming from the direction of the grand serpentine city. Wu Mu's elegant figure stiffened, and his heart couldn't help but tremble. This dog's bark, why was it so familiar? That terrifying existence. Shouldn't it stay in the imperial city? Why would it appear in the grand serpentine city? Oh no, Dooley has never seen how terrifying that existence is. Damn it, I mustn't provoke it. Wu Mu's heart trembled. With a single thought, true energy gushed out of his body. Sword light immediately streaked across the sky and flew toward the grand serpentine city. In the illusory spirit swamp, Wu Yunbai was riding on a spirit horse. This spirit horse was unexpectedly able to gallop across the soft swamp mud at an extremely fast speed. A dog's bark, which wasn't very loud, reached her ears, causing her to be stunned. This dog's bark seemed a little familiar, wasn't it? She couldn't help but imagine a lazy, plump dog walking like a cat. Just as she was lost in thought, she suddenly felt a pitch-black shadow above her head. Her heart suddenly skipped a beat. She subconsciously raised her head, and her pupils abruptly shrank. Above her head was a gigantic metal warship that blotted out the sun and sky. An oppressive aura emanated from the warship, causing Wu Yunbai's entire body to stiffen. At the front of the warship, a figure stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He also saw her. His gaze shot down like lightning, as if it was about to tear through the air. Wu Yunbai felt a piercing pain in her eyes. She couldn't help but cover her face as tears streamed down her cheeks. The spirit horse had already been frightened by the majestic pressure and knelt down in the swamp mud. It didn't dare to move even an inch despite being stained by the muddy mud. Executive Feng proudly stood at the front of the warship and indifferently glanced at Wu Yunbai. Oh, a native of the training ground? A 7th grade battle saint. Perhaps you know the location of the crystal mine. You could be my guide then. Executive Feng muttered to himself. Then the corners of his mouth curled up, and he casually waved his hand. Wu Yunbai opened her tearful eyes, and her entire body froze. From a void, a gigantic hand that blotted out the sky suddenly slammed down. With a suffocating pressure, it grabbed her whole body and dragged her into the warship. Then, the warship rumbled and continued forward. The spirit swamp regained its peace. Chapter 388. The cold and arrogant serpentine sovereign calmly swept her gaze over everything. The serpentine sovereign's graceful figure appeared at the entrance of the imperial palace. Did you come here to make a joke? On the stone walls on both sides of the tunnel, there were some fragments of crystals. Those fragments reflected the sunlight and made the tunnel look rather hazy. He turned his head and looked at Du Wei and Du Kai. He furrowed his brows and said calmly, "Open the city gate. I will take Onarbu to see the serpentine sovereign. There must be some misunderstanding here. We must resolve this misunderstanding to avoid unnecessary conflicts." The corners of Bu Fang's mouth curled up. He shot a glance at Wu Mu but didn't say anything. Bang! Another vendor took out a rosy steamed lobster from the pot and peeled off its shell. The lobster meat was trembling and emitted a rich fragrance. Even though this tunnel was beneath the illusory spirit swamp, it wasn't damp at all. In fact, the air was a little dry, and the ground felt very solid when one stepped on it. The anchored ship was smashed by the terrifying waves, and wood splinters flew everywhere. Wu Mu wore a complicated expression. He had crushed the last talisman he left for the Serpentine Sovereign. He felt a sense of emptiness in his heart. Although Wu Mu was the villa master of the White Cloud Villa, he had great prestige in the Grand Serpentine City. If Owner Boo and the Black Dog were to cause trouble in the rear, the Grand Serpentine City wouldn't be able to withstand it. Baijan was taken aback. After listening to the Serpentine's description of the object, he couldn't make a judgment. He didn't know what the object hidden in the crystal mine was. The amount of crystals in the crystal mine shocked Baijan more and more. It seemed as if it was inexhaustible. Baijan's heart trembled. He was extremely shocked. Wu Mu nodded his head in satisfaction and led Bu Fong and Blackie into the Grand Serpentine City. The western part of the Grand Serpentine City is close to the boundless sea. Thus, the main ingredients of the Grand Serpentine City come from the sea. Many seafood and low-grade spirit sea beasts are caught and turned into fragrant ingredients, Wu Mu explained. It was perfect that Wu Mu was going to bring them into the city. That was hard to say. With such a powerful black dog as a companion, that black walk was definitely not something ordinary. She would not believe that this human did not have a powerful background. One after another, the enormous sea spirit beasts landed on the ground, creating a huge splash. The oceanic species experts on the backs of the sea spirit beasts revealed excited looks as they urged the sea spirit beasts to sprint forward. A blood-soaked figure fell from the sky and landed in the middle of the crowd. Bu Fong looked at Wu Mu, who was panting heavily as he landed in front of him, and a strange expression appeared on his face. The Serpentine Sovereign had crushed the sword talisman he had left for her. There was no doubt that something big had happened. Could it be because of Owner Boo? The energy in the crystal was circulating like a resplendent diamond. It was too beautiful to behold. When Wu Mu saw that figure, his complexion changed. Moreover, from Wu Mu's expression, he seemed to revere that human. Baijan was also confused. Due was very bold. Her chest, which was wrapped in a purple cloth, slightly heaved up and down. Then, she ordered people to open the city gates. Since Baijan couldn't understand what she meant, he decided to take a look inside. However, why would a crystal ball appear in the mine? The Serpentine Sovereign asked in a stern voice. Bu Fong originally wanted to order Blackie to blast open the city gates. However, he didn't expect that Wu Mu would suddenly appear. That was because there was a dazzling light shooting out from the depths of the mine. Wu Mu said with a smile, "Why would a spirit beast appear in the crystal mine? What was he trying to do?" An oceanic species expert, who wore a suit of armor and had blue skin covered with fine scales, had a meticulous expression on his face. "Shouldn't you be staying in the Light Wind Imperial City? Why did you come to the illusory spirit swamp to cause trouble? Why did Baijan suddenly get injured? Could it be that someone invaded the crystal mine? Sir, that primordial crystal mine discovered something peculiar." All of a sudden, Baijan's pupils shrank as he stared at the crystal ball. His heart palpitated. They were heading toward the Grand Serpentine City. Bu Fong nodded his head. Soon, they arrived at the majestic Grand Serpentine Imperial Palace. A huge wave rapidly approached them, and they finally reached the precipitous cliff. A sword light whistled through the air from a distant place. Baijan was riding on his sword and hovered in the air above the crater. He continued patrolling the area. Just as he finished speaking, a sharp whistling sound came from the sky above the Grand Serpentine City. As soon as he entered the Grand Serpentine City, Bu Fong was slightly astonished by the majestic and prosperous city. Baijan, compared to the Light Wind Imperial City, the Grand Serpentine City was much more prosperous. The surrounding buildings were of a completely different style from the Light Wind Imperial City. There were all kinds of peddlers who had set up stalls on both sides of the street. A red light shot out from the eyes of the spirit beasts, and they locked onto Baijan. The serpent men gathered there and discussed spiritedly. They stopped what they were doing and looked around curiously. When they moved aside, the glowing object appeared in front of Baijan. Wu Mu led Bu Fong up the slope and they quickly arrived in front of the Serpentine Sovereign. Those high-grade crystals were extremely wonderful. They were the most beautiful things in the world for cultivators. When the Serpentine Sovereign saw Bufong, her green hair fluttered in the wind. Her eyes widened and her aura surged. It seemed as though she had just recalled something. When Baijan arrived, the serpent men quickly moved aside and created a path for him. He slowly raised his head. Baijan sheathed his sword and landed on the soft swamp. He slowly paced back and forth. The serpent men and the White Cloud Villa's people were busy working around him. The surrounding stone walls were covered with crystals, and the crystals made the surroundings look extremely gorgeous. Baijan continued forward. After walking for a long time, he suddenly slowed down. Impossible. It should be something even more serious. Du Wei, on the other hand, was quite meticulous. Could it be that this 7th-grade lad had some sort of background? The people in the mine were still bustling with activity. The serpent men were unceasingly digging out the precious high-grade crystals from the pit. Those crystals were glistening under the sunlight. Bufong calmly glanced at the Serpentine Sovereign. He had already met the Serpentine Sovereign in the 100,000 Mountains. Naturally, the Serpentine Sovereign had also met him. That was the black dog that even a 10th-grade divine expert was killed by him. Bufong had to persuade the Serpentine Sovereign not to provoke Bufong and that terrifying black dog. The appearance of the big crystal mine had an extraordinary significance for the White Cloud Villa and the Serpent Men City. It would definitely increase the power of the two great factions by another level. Honorbu, if you have anything to say, let's enter the Serpent Men City and have a chat. We can sit down and have a good chat. It's you, the human lad who swallowed the 10,000 bestial flames. The huge wave rolled down and flooded the village at the bottom of the cliff. Countless houses were smashed into pieces by the huge wave in an instant. Du Wei and Du Kai looked at each other in dismay. The serpent men on the city wall were also dumbfounded. They followed the serpent man into the crystal mine. However, the illusory spirit swamp was huge. The surging seawater only lasted for a short while before it subsided. The ground seemed to tremble. Numerous oceanic species experts and oceanic spiritual beasts rushed out and rushed into the illusory spirit swamp in a single file. A serpent man whose body was covered in mud scuttled out. When he saw Wu Yunbai, he hurriedly crawled toward her. His face was filled with anxiety. On the side of the street, there were many gourmet stalls. A serpent man was skillfully roasting oily squid. A rich fragrance wafted through the air. Sure enough, after taking a few steps, Bufong smelled all kinds of fragrances. The surging seawater gradually surged toward the illusory spirit swamp. Those things were bred in the crystal mine. They were definitely priceless treasures. They were 3 huge crystal balls. Their surfaces seemed as if they were made of crystals. However, they were not very smooth and full of bumps and hollows. Baijan furrowed his brows and patted one of the crystal balls. He discovered that the crystal ball was extremely solid. It was similar to a large crystal ball. All of a sudden, Baijan felt the ground tremble slightly. His mind trembled, and he looked at the deep pit below him in puzzlement. Wumu didn't expect that Onerba would really appear here. Moreover, he was accompanied by that terrifying black dog. It seemed as if he was going to attack the Grand Serpent Men City. Illusory Spirit Swamp, the place where the crystal mine was located. Bufong was in high spirits as he looked around. Such a flourishing city would surely have many unique delicacies. The fragrance that filled the air made Bufong even more excited. The other serpent men were somewhat unwilling and puzzled. However, there was nothing they could do. He was riding on a deep-sea mantis prawn. The mantis prawn's numerous claws scratched the ground before it shot forward at an extremely fast speed. What the hell? You are the Villa Master of the White Cloud Villa, one of the top experts of the southern region. How could you be so respectful toward a mere 7th gray battle saint? The 3 crystal balls flickered with a dazzling radiance. A blurry figure gradually seeped out from the Yuan crystal wall. The figure was like droplets of water, quickly transforming into a peculiar beast like spirit beast. His entire body was bathed in blood. His aura was weak, and his body was covered with hideous wounds. He was the White Cloud Villa's supreme being, who was in charge of guarding the crystal mine. Baijan, the serpent man, said anxiously. However, there was a trace of excitement in the depths of his eyes. The White Cloud Villa's villa master, Wu Mu, was a swordsman at the peak of the supreme being realm. His cultivation was extremely powerful. Even the serpentine's sovereign might not be his opponent. How could such an existence suddenly appear here? As the waves receded, the oceanic species experts continuously walked out of it. Du Kai, who had just slid down from the city walls, was already convulsing his muscles. He wanted to rush back to the city walls, but before he could, Wu Mu appeared. Honorbu, perhaps there is some misunderstanding? Let's talk peacefully. Don't fight. It's not good to fight. Wu Mu smiled as he spoke to Bufang. Or, did something happen to the crystal mine? Chapter 389. Just as Bufang was about to rush out, Bufang, Brad, you stay here by yourself. The Lord Go has something to do. Go and play around for a while. The atmosphere became slightly awkward. It seemed like Bufang had been abandoned by someone just like that. Why was Baijan here? Wasn't he in charge of patrolling the crystal mine? The water beside Bufang suddenly exploded and a mantis prawn waved its sickle-like claws. It rushed out of the water and swung its sharp sickle-like claws at Bufang. It wanted to cut Bufang into two halves. He looked at the mantis prawn as if he was looking at an excellent cooking ingredient. Just as he walked out of the main hall, a gust of wind with a fishy and salty smell blew over. It made his hair, which was tied up with a velvet rope, flutter in the wind. Yufu was taken aback. Then, she covered her mouth and laughed. She rolled her eyes at Bufang and thought that Bufang was just joking. It was indeed a crystal mine. However, this wasn't what Bufang cared about. Owner Bu, please wait for a moment. I will come back and continue our discussion after I finish my business. Bufang had experienced the might of the magic array cannon. It was quite extraordinary. The sea spirit beast was unexpectedly forced back by the magic array cannon and was unable to climb into the city walls. Seawater surged in from outside the city. The deep-sea mantis prawn waved its sickle-like claws and rushed into the grand serpentine city. When everyone heard Baijan mention the crystal mine, they suddenly understood. Did something really happen to the crystal mine? Bufang calmly nodded his head. He swept his gaze around the room, and his gaze landed on the chains that bound Yufu. A beam of purple light shot over from afar. It was the Serpentine King, Du Wei, who had left with a Serpentine sovereign. Yufu was extremely astonished. Mantis shrimps were also known as mantis prawns or mantis shrimps because the two claws on their heads were like the sickle claws of a mantis, and they had amazing attacking power. When Bufang heard Yufu's words, his heart instantly relaxed. The corners of his mouth slightly curled up, and he nodded his head. Green smoke curled around his hand, and then the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. Small-headed, deep-sea mantis prawns rushed out one after another. These deep-sea mantis prawns had different grades. Some of them were 4th or 5th grade, while some were 6th or 7th grade. There were also many 8th grade deep-sea mantis prawns. Bufang was shocked and turned his head to look outside the palace. Take care of him first. Stay here and don't run around. I'll go out and take a look. It was a sea spirit beast that looked like a giant prawn. Monstrous waves suddenly swept over and fiercely collided with the city wall. Bufang's eyes lit up and he smacked his lips. The scalding hot oyster pancake caused by Jean's palms to feel a burning pain. His already pale face turned even paler. Boom boom. This sea spirit beast was extremely violent, and it fiercely collided with the Serpent Men city wall. Why did they lock you up? Bufang furrowed his brows and asked. However, the rich fragrance of the oyster pancake attracted Baijan's attention. What's going on? Bufang furrowed his brows and brought Yufu to the main hall. He looked at Baijan, who was still leaning against a pillar and trying his best to recover. Bufang turned his head and asked Yufu. True energy suddenly surged out of his body. and Bu Fong's figure burst out of the city. Bu Fong tossed the oyster pancake to Baijan and didn't pay attention to him anymore. Then, he slowly strolled around the main hall. The two Serpentine kings, Du Kai and Du Wei, looked at each other and followed the Serpentine sovereign out of the imperial palace. Yu Fu nodded her head earnestly. She had a feeling that something bad was about to happen. The guards and experts of the Serpent Men race were doing their best to resist the attack. The magic array on the city wall flickered, and light cannons were shot out from the magic array. The light cannons collided with the sea spirit beast's body, causing a series of explosions. The gigantic beast, scythe-like claws, tore open a large hole in the wall of the Grand Serpentman City. The stall selling barbecued squid and the store selling steamed lobsters were instantly submerged by the seawater. Honor Bu, it's really you. Just as Bu Fong was about to rescue Yu Fu. Compared to the attack power of the mantis prawn, the taste of the mantis prawn caught Bu Fong's attention. For a moment, mournful wails resounded throughout the Grand Serpentman City. The seawater surged down and submerged the originally noisy street. Bu Fong tossed the oyster pancake to Baijan. Baijan, who was still in a daze, unconsciously caught the oyster pancake. The Lord Ghost said, all of a sudden, a trace of excitement flickered in the dog's eyes, and saliva flowed out of its mouth. Bu Fong stepped on the water with an excited expression on his face. The deep-sea mantis prawn was an ingredient that could only be chanced upon and not sought after. Ear-piercing laughter came from above the waves. A large group of blue-skinned experts of the oceanic species rode the waves and looked at the Grand Serpentman City, which was being tormented by the deep-sea mantis prawn. This sea spirit beast seemed somewhat familiar. At the very least, the magic array cannons on the city wall were destroyed by the impact and lost their effectiveness. Baijan coughed out blood and glared at Wu Mu. With great difficulty, he said, Manor Master, Yuan Crystal Mine. However, after a long moment of silence, Yu Fu was the first to regain her senses and shouted excitedly. Her small face was flushed with excitement. Bu Fong was taken aback. He straightened his waist and looked at Black. He discovered that the black dog had turned into a black blur and disappeared at an astonishing speed. However, before Bu Fong could answer him, he flew up on his sword and took the lead to fly out of the imperial palace. This left a deep impression on Bu Fong. Some people were dumbfounded as they looked at the back of the figure that had shot out in shock and uncertainty. The speed of the deep-sea mantis prawns was extremely fast. Moreover, their momentum was extremely powerful. They crashed into the walls of the Grand Serpentman City and almost destroyed it. I said that I don't want to become the successor. I just want to go back to the store and learn culinary skills from you. The Serpentine sovereign didn't agree to my request and locked me up, Yu Fu said, feeling wronged. The deep-sea mantis prawns shot out of the sea and cut the fleeing serpent men in half. Blood gushed out of them. Judging from Baijan's appearance, nothing good had happened. The Serpentine sovereign and Wu Mu were startled. They looked in astonishment at Baijan, who was lying on the ground and coughing up blood. His body was covered with numerous wounds and blood was flowing out of it. This was something unimaginable for Baijan, who had already reached the Supreme Being realm. Everyone was guessing what had happened. The complexion of the Serpentine sovereign changed. Could it be that the experts of the oceanic species had already arrived? Crash! The entire imperial palace suddenly shook violently, and everyone was unable to stand steadily. Bu Fong turned around and leisurely walked out of the imperial palace. However, Bu Fong didn't cower in the face of this murderous intent. Instead, he licked his lips and revealed an excited expression. Bu Fong looked at Baijan, who was lying on the ground and coughing up blood. He was slightly surprised. He naturally recognized Baijan, but he was astonished by his current state. At this moment, Du Wei's charming face was filled with killing intent. She looked at the deep-sea mantis prawn, which was unceasingly attacking the city. She angrily shouted and charged toward the deep-sea mantis prawn. Only Bu Fong and Baijan, who was lying on the ground and coughing up blood, were left in the imperial palace. There was also Blackie, the black dog, who was walking like a cat. However, the serpent men guards retreated in an orderly manner. Soon, the serpent men were forced to retreat into the towering imperial palace. Blackie was originally lazily staying by Bu Fong's side. Suddenly, the lazy dog's eyes narrowed, and there seemed to be a beam of light shooting out from the depths of its eyes. With his true energy and supreme being cultivation, Blackie quickly stopped the rupturing of his skin and stabilized his injuries. He even thought of a name for the dish. It would be called braised mantis prawns. It seemed as if it wanted to climb into the city from outside. Blackie, the plump dog, was nowhere to be found. Bu Fong couldn't find him, so he left the imperial palace alone. Wu Mu's expression was incomparably grave as he looked at Bu Fong and hurriedly said, "While he was saving you Fu," Bu Fong earnestly said, "learning culinary arts from me is not a bad thing. Becoming my apprentice will give you a better future than becoming the Serpentine Sovereign." Bu Fong grabbed his hair to hide his embarrassment and turned his head to look at the surroundings of the imperial palace. The pungent smell of blood wafted out of Bai Zhan's body. When the frightened serpent men were about to retreat into the imperial palace, a figure rushed out of the imperial palace and charged into the chaotic crowd. He stepped on the surface of the water and charged forward. Bang! Bu Fong was flabbergasted as he looked at the densely packed sea spirit beasts outside the grand serpentine city. As Bai Zhan bit into the oyster pancake, a rich fragrance filled the air. Bu Fong couldn't help but lick his lips. He took out an oyster pancake and started eating it. The tender meat of the mantis prawn appeared in his mind. The salty taste of seafood made him excited. Bu Fong swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and his gaze flickered as he looked at the mantis prawns. Bang! 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 What appeared before Bu Fong's eyes was an incomparably huge spirit beast. To be more precise, it was a sea spirit beast. An angry shout came from among the experts of the oceanic species who were treading on the waves. Then, several figures soared into the sky and joined the battle. Du Wei, who was fighting against the gigantic supreme mantis prawn, was severely injured. She fell from the sky and crashed into the city, causing many buildings to collapse. It looked like a centipede with densely packed, long legs that were like steel blades. On its head, there was a sawtooth-shaped sickle hand. Its compound eyes rolled around, and a tyrannical aura burst forth from its body. Bu Fong stroked his chin. The deep-sea mantis prawn. Wasn't this the legendary mantis shrimp? The Serpentine Sovereign swept her gaze over Bu Fong with a profound gaze. However, she had something more important to worry about at this moment, so she didn't say anything to Bu Fong. She waved her serpentine tail in the sky, and she shot forward, chasing after Wu Mu. Originally, Bai Zhan had only tried to take a bite of the oyster pancake. However, as soon as he swallowed the pancake, his eyes widened. He felt as if there was a raging, flame-like true qi rising from his lower abdomen. He felt as if his body had recovered a lot of strength. Bu Fong took a stroll around the luxurious imperial palace and discovered a room. He pushed open the door and saw a beautiful figure inside. Yu Fu and Bu Fong stared at each other speechlessly. The Serpent Men guards also began to throw their spears. Most of the Serpent Men guards were around 4th grade battle spirits. Even though the spears they threw with spirit energy did not cause much damage to the Supreme Beast, they were still able to inflict some damage to it by accumulating enough spirit energy. The Dragon Bone kitchen knife was indestructible. With a casual slash, it cut the sturdy chain in half and rescued Yu Fu. Bu Fong spoke in a serious tone. Bu Fong looked at Bai Zhan, who was coughing up blood and struggling to get up from the ground, leaning against a pillar. After hesitating for a moment, Bu Fong took out a steaming hot oyster bun from the system's dimensional storage. Who could injure Bai Zhan, who was at the Supreme Being realm, to such an extent? Chapter 390. Illusory Spirit Swamp, Big Crystal Mine. At this moment, the swamp seemed to be boiling. The swamp mud became dry in an instant. Hazy steam rose continuously, causing the swamp mud to harden. Strange roars kept coming out from the deep pit, accompanied by miserable howls. The blood of many strong serpent men spurted out of the deep pit. It was a ghastly sight. Spirit beasts that seemed to be formed from crystals flashed with violent red eyes as they tore apart the serpent men in the deep pit. Formless roars came from their mouths. These spirit beasts were guarding the crystal mine, as if they were guarding something in the crystal mine. In the distant sky, several figures shot over, bombarding the air with crashing sounds. Wumu arrived on his sword with a solemn expression. He couldn't help but sigh when he saw the blood spurting out of the crystal mine. Serpentine Sovereign Du Li also arrived at the big crystal mine, swaying her serpent tail. This big crystal mine was jointly developed by the White Cloud Villa and the Grand Serpentine City. There were many strong serpent men and disciples of the White Cloud Villa inside. Now, the strongest experts of these two forces looked at the scarlet blood spurting out of the mouth of the mine with pale faces. They felt as if their hearts had been hammered by something. Damn it, what happened in the crystal mine? Wumu shouted angrily. He flew down on his sword and charged into the mine with boundless rage. The Serpentine Sovereign quickly followed. Behind her, the Serpentine King, Du Kai, hesitated for a moment before following. The moment the three of them entered the mine, the pores on their bodies constricted. Inside the mine, the pungent smell of blood permeated the entire mine. The ground was littered with broken limbs, broken serpent tails, and scattered heads. It was like a scene from hell. This scene was suffocating. Wumu was furious. The Serpentine Sovereign was also cold. They stared at the dark depths of the mine. There seemed to be a violent tremor. Then, spirit beasts that seemed to be formed from crystals emerged. The aura of these spirit beasts was extremely terrifying. In the sky above the illusory spirit swamp, an ice-cold metallic warship slowly approached. It floated above the steaming mine. Finally found it. Executive Feng looked down at the huge mine. Although the entrance was filled with the stench of blood, it could not conceal the excitement in his eyes. Many of the Grand Baron Sect's disciples behind Executive Feng were also watching in amazement and excitement. Suddenly, Executive Feng's pupils constricted. He saw a black shadow shoot past and land on the ground. His brows slightly furrowed as he focused his gaze and saw a pure black plump dog below the warship. The black dog strutted its elegant cat-like steps, seemingly very excited as it paced above the spiritual swamp. Its tongue flicked in and out, its saliva flying everywhere. Where did this fat black dog come from? Executive Feng was somewhat speechless. He only gave it a glance before withdrawing his gaze. A mere black dog was truly unable to attract his attention. However, in the next moment, Executive Feng felt his body stiffen. This was because when he swept his gaze across the area again, he was horrified to discover that the black dog that had been pacing above the illusory spirit swamp had disappeared. Not even a strand of dog fur was left behind. It was as if his eyes were playing tricks on him. What's going on? Could it be that my eyes are playing tricks on me? Executive Feng sucked in a breath of cold air and rubbed his eyes. How could a dignified divine physique echelon expert like him be playing tricks on him? Even he himself would not believe it if he said it out loud. Executive Feng shook his head and put aside the matter of the black dog that had mysteriously disappeared. His gaze once again fell upon the entrance of the mine. However, he was not in a hurry to enter. According to past experiences, every crystal mine is guarded by crystal beasts. Let's first send someone to explore and see how strong the crystal beasts here are. Executive Feng was silent for a moment. Then, he arranged for a 9th grade supreme being from the warship to enter the mine. Since they had already found the crystal mine, the 3 crystal sources within it should not be able to escape. Buzz's green smoke curled up, and the golden dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in Bu Feng's hand. As he twirled the knife, the blade reflected a dazzling blade light, and an invisible dragon's might burst forth from the golden dragon bone kitchen knife. In an instant, the body of the mantis prawn that shot out from the stream of water stiffened, and the sickle-like claws that were slashing toward Bu Feng froze. Bu Feng licked his lips and waved the golden dragon bone kitchen knife. He immediately tore apart the mantis prawn's sickle-like claws. Then he stretched out his palm and caught the sturdy mantis prawn in his hand. The mantis prawn's shell was covered with sharp thorns, and it struggled unceasingly. It seemed as though it wanted to use its sharp thorns to hurt Bufong so that it could escape. It was a pity that Bufong was not someone who would be tricked so easily. The black turtle constellation wok spun and appeared. Without even looking at it, Bufong threw the mantis prawn he caught into the wok. The dragons might suppress the mantis prawn and prevented it from moving. Bufong exclaimed inwardly when he succeeded in his attack, and his movements became even faster. The surface of the water around him kept cracking. Then, one after another, mantis prawns leaped out of the water, dashing towards Bufong. Bufong narrowed his eyes and infused his true energy into the golden dragon bone kitchen knife, causing the dragon's might within the knife to soar. All of the mantis prawns that were leaping into the air were pressed back into the water with a splash. Bufong was very excited. He felt countless mantis prawns twisting their waists toward him. He walked on the water surface and swung the golden dragon bone kitchen knife casually. Every time it hit the water surface, a mantis prawn that couldn't move would be slapped away. The black turtle constellation wok scooped up the mantis prawn. Pa pa pa. He walked on the water, slapped, and captured mantis prawns all the way. This was a sudden contrast to the doomsday-like scene around him. It was somewhat comical. The Serpent Men's city was in a mess at this moment. Almost all of the Serpent Men were wailing and retreating in the face of these tyrannical invaders. How could there be someone like Bufong, who would be so violent and unreasonable as to kidnap mantis shrimps? When the Serpent Men saw the mantis prawns, they were so frightened that they retreated. However, Bufong seemed to be afraid that he didn't have enough mantis prawns in his black turtle constellation wok. The oceanic species experts, who were treading on the water, had their faces constricted. They looked strangely at the human lad who was capturing mantis prawns. Who is that lad? Nuku, go and kill this human for me. Release all the mantis prawn citizens he captured. An oceanic species expert, who was clad in scales, said to a sturdy blue-skinned oceanic species expert, who was brimming with explosive energy. Just a lowly human. My lord, prepare to hear my good news. Nuku of the oceanic species expert roared. He shot down from the waves and charged toward Bufong, who was capturing mantis prawns. Nuku was an 8th grade war god. He held a battle spear in his hand and charged toward Bufong. Bang! The corners of Bufong's mouth curled up. He stomped his foot on the surface of the water, raising the waves several meters high. With a thought, he took out a bottle filled with golden oil from the system's storage space. Every time he left the store, Bufong would prepare the ingredients necessary for cooking in case of emergencies. The bottle spun rapidly in Bufong's hand. The muscles in Bufong's palm trembled slightly, causing the bottle of oil to spin continuously. Strands of golden oil poured out like silk, sprinkling into the pile of mantis prawns in the black turtle constellation wok. There seemed to be some other force within the black turtle constellation wok that was suppressing these deep-sea mantis prawns, forcing them to scurry around. Swish, after the oil was sprinkled, it completely covered all the mantis prawns in the black turtle constellation wok. Gurgle. These mantis prawns were a little confused. They had a bad premonition. They spat out the oil, spat out bubbles, and struggled in the wok, trying to escape. Roar! Damn human lad. Quickly release all the mantis prawns, or else die. Nuku's blue skin suddenly swelled up, and his eyes widened like those of a dead fish. His cheeks spurted out seawater, and with a roar, he charged toward Bufong with the long spear in his hand. Bufong's excited mind suddenly froze, and he glanced at this plaything in confusion. The tip of his foot abruptly touched the surface of the water, and the wave shattered. Bufong's figure dashed out, and his chest swelled up, and his face became flushed. Then, he opened his mouth and spat out a golden flame. A ball of golden flame floated up, and with a loud rumble, it turned into a sea of fire, covering Nuku within. The scorching heat startled Nuku. In front of him was a sea of gold, and he couldn't find the human lad at all. All of a sudden, a whistling sound rang out. Nuka's heart jumped. He turned his head to look, and all he saw was a black shadow that covered his eyes, suddenly smashing toward him. Dong, with a muffled sound, Nuka felt as if the world was spinning, and his head was about to explode. His entire body fell into the water, sinking to the bottom. The black turtle constellation wok spun, flying back to Bu Fong's hand. A ball of golden flames sprang out, drilling into the metal mouth under the wok. Boom! Braised mantis prawns. The corners of Bu Fong's mouth curled up, and the fire instantly surged. Inside the black turtle constellation wok, the dumbfounded mantis prawns that were spitting bubbles suddenly widened their eyes. They began to move around randomly, causing the oil to splash everywhere. However, they were firmly suppressed by the black turtle constellation wok. In just a short while, a wave of fragrance permeated the air from the wok. Smelling the familiar aroma of the mantis prawns, Bu Fong suddenly felt a little hungry. With a thought, a jar of ice heart jade urn wine appeared in his hand. Removing the clay seal, he poured the wine into the black turtle constellation wok. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. In an instant, steaming hot air, accompanied by the aroma of wine and mantis prawns, surged out, rolling and rolling. The oceanic species warriors, who were riding on the waves, widened their eyes. Their minds were startled, and their mouths were trembling. That human! How dare he cook a mantis prawn citizen in front of us? The oceanic species! Damn it! Catch him for me! The oceanic species warriors angrily roared, causing the surrounding waves to explode. Many oceanic species warriors instantly felt their scalps go numb. They responded and chased after Bu Fong. Bu Fong held the black turtle constellation wok, which was steaming hot. He was cooking the braised mantis prawns. The mantis prawns were about to be cooked. How could Bu Fong bear to be disturbed by these blue-skinned creatures? Hence, he broke into a run, stepping on the water's surface as he sped away. In just a short while, he rushed out of the big city. As he ran, Bu Fong turned his head to look at the giant mantis prawn. He couldn't help but smack his lips. With such a big head, it must have a lot of meat. Bu Fong thought to himself. Unfortunately, this was a supreme mantis prawn. Bu Fong temporarily couldn't defeat it. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't let it go. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The 10,000 bestial flames beneath the black turtle constellation wok burned brighter. Then, the aroma from the wok became thicker and thicker. The giant mantis prawn's compound eyes widened, and its giant sickle-like claws slashed at the air. In an instant, the sound of air being torn apart resounded. Its numerous legs suddenly swung, and like a spring, it chased after Bu Fong. For a moment, the scene became somewhat strange. Bu Fong held onto the fragrant braised mantis prawn as he sped away. Behind him were the enraged oceanic species warriors and the giant mantis prawn that had gone berserk. The serpent men who were fleeing from the Grand Serpentine City were dumbfounded as they watched this scene unfold. Du Wei covered her swollen chest. She looked at Bu Fong, who was running away while treading on the water surface. Her exquisite face seemed to be a loss whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 391. Du Wei stared at Bu Fong's back as he left. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She didn't expect the previously stern and arrogant human to be such a joker. However, when she thought about it, it made sense. A human who dared to attack the Grand Serpentine City alone with a dog. What else wouldn't he dare to do? Cooking mantis shrimps in front of the supreme mantis shrimps was a piece of cake. What an interesting human. However, she still had to thank him. Du Wei's eyes suddenly turned cold. With a wave of her serpent tail, she stirred up huge waves and dashed into the Imperial Palace. Activate the defensive magic array. Blast these damned ugly things down for me. As soon as Du Wei entered the palace, her furious roar spread to every corner of the palace. The serpent men who were hiding in the palace felt the ground shake. In the next moment, the waves around the Imperial Palace were automatically cleared. A pale green light circulated and soared into the sky. Numerous magic arrays appeared around the Serpent Men's imperial palace. Even the air was filled with them. Du Wei's purple hair fluttered behind her. Her eyes were ice cold, and her red lips curled up into a cold arc. In the next moment, her will connected with the numerous magic arrays. The magic arrays facing the oceanic species army suddenly glowed. One by one, the magic array cannons were activated and shot out resplendent rays of light. As Bufang ran, he couldn't help but sniff the air. The braised mantis shrimps in the black turtle constellation wok became more and more fragrant. The fragrance was so rich that it made Bufang salivate. Seafood, such as flower crabs and mantis shrimp, were really fragrant when braised in oil. It was even more fragrant than the egg-fried rice in Fong Fong's little store. Due to the difference in the quality of seafood, when braised in oil, the aroma of the fats was completely released. It was so appetizing that people couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Bufang took large strides as he rapidly trod on the water. The amount of seawater in the illusory spirit swamp was increasing and was almost completely submerged. The water level had also reached a meter high. If Bufang did not use his true energy to support himself, he would soon sink into the water. This environment was very unfriendly for Bufang, but for the oceanic species powerhouses and the supreme mantis shrimp that were chasing after him, it was wonderful. Compared to humans, the oceanic race's experts were a bit ugly. Their faces were like blue-skinned fish that had turned into humans. Their eyes were round and ferocious, their mouths were big and flat, and there were cheeks on both sides of their heads. His fingers were webbed, making him look like a giant fishman. Some of them even had a blue fishtail covered in scales growing out of their buttocks, which was quite strange. At this moment, the oceanic species experts were looking at Bufang with anger. Bufang was cooking the mantis prawns without any scruples. He was simply looking down on the oceanic species experts. Hiss hiss. The supreme mantis shrimp also let out a deep hiss. Waves surged up to the sky, and its densely packed legs moved around, causing its huge body to shoot forward at high speed. It quickly shortened the distance between it and Bufang. Just when it was not far from Bufang, the supreme mantis shrimp's eyes widened, and its two scythe-like claws suddenly shot out. It was so fast that no one could catch its trajectory and speed. The air seemed to be torn apart at this moment. Bufang's body, which was holding the black turtle constellation wok, suddenly became cold. He felt an ice-cold, killing intent shrouding his heart, which had been stirred by the aroma of the braised mantis shrimp, and it suddenly became tense. Bang! True energy surged, and the water under his feet suddenly burst out with towering waves. Bufang's figure shot up into the sky. The supreme mantis shrimp's two scythe-like claws fiercely swiped down. Another explosion occurred, and two huge craters appeared where Bufang had been. The waves were still swirling in the craters. What a strong and powerful scythe-like claws. This mantis shrimp definitely has meat, and the taste is definitely delicious. Bufang flew in the air and praised. As he floated in the air, the oceanic species expert gradually closed the distance between them. An 8th grade war god oceanic species warrior let out a roar. A trident appeared in his hand, and he suddenly shot it toward Bufang. Bufang took a deep breath, and with a thought, his true energy surged. The true energy in his body was greatly consumed, and the black turtle constellation wok suddenly expanded at this moment. The patterns on the surface of the black turtle constellation wok seemed to have come to life, and a golden radiance surged. The black turtle constellation wok, which was as big as a small mountain, was fiercely thrown out by Bufang. When the trident hit the black turtle constellation wok, it was naturally bounced off. It couldn't even move the black turtle constellation wok. The few oceanic species warriors instantly sucked in a breath of cold air. What the F***CK was that? The black turtle constellation wok whizzed toward them. At this moment, the oceanic species warrior's dead fish eyes suddenly widened, and he raised his palm to slap the black turtle constellation wok. With so many oceanic species warriors attacking together, they were full of confidence. However, when their palms touched the black turtle constellation walk, the group of oceanic species warriors' faces instantly became extremely ugly. Sizzle. Sizzle. Waves of meaty aroma burst out, and the oceanic species warriors' faces twisted. Miserable howls came from their mouths, and their eyes were full of fear. Hot. Extremely hot. The black turtle constellation walk was burning with a heaven and earth obsidian flame. Even if it didn't burst out with a powerful force, the black turtle constellation walk was still burning, and it wasn't something their bodies could withstand. These oceanic species warriors felt as though their palms were about to be roasted, and the webbing of their palms was so hot that it was torn and curled up. However, what made them even more frightened was that the black turtle constellation walk was still crushing toward their bodies. This King, such a scalding walk. Sizzle. Sizzle. Accompanied by waves of meaty aroma, countless oceanic species warriors fell from the void, howling miserably. They fell into the water below, and steam rose from the surface of the water. Bufang looked at this situation in shock. He didn't think that the scorching black turtle constellation walk could have such an effect. He had discovered a new way to use the black walk. With a thought, the black turtle constellation walk shrank, flying back to Bufang. With inertia, the steam in the walk surged along with the aroma. A mantis shrimp that had been cooked until it was red-hot flew out from the walk. Oil splashed in the air, and the aroma filled the air. Bufang's eyes instantly lit up. "It's you, the braised mantis shrimp." Green smoke curled up, and the golden dragon bone kitchen knife appeared. Bufang used the knife to catch the mantis shrimp that had been braised until its shell was bright red. The entire mantis shrimp was curled up, and steam was rising from it, and the aroma filled the air. Bufang's knife shook, and the mantis shrimp flew into the air. With a twist of the knife, the mantis shrimp's tail was cut off, and a small opening was revealed. A faint juice dripped down from it. Bufang covered his fingers with true energy. He pinched the mantis shrimp, and with a hook of the knife, he pulled it open. With a tearing sound, the mantis shrimp's shell was torn open by Bufang. What was left was the white and tender shrimp meat. The braised shrimp meat was really fragrant. The meat was tender, and steam was dense. Bufang swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Pinching the head of the shrimp, he took a big bite of the meat. The tender shrimp meat entered his mouth, and his eyes lit up. It was as if an indescribable feeling flowed into his heart. The shrimp meat was full of elasticity, and as it bounced between his teeth, the aroma filled the space between Bufang's mouth and the tip of his nose. The freshness of the seafood and the aroma of the ice heart jade urn wine spread together, intoxicating him. The spirit energy contained in the mantis shrimp meat flowed down from Bufang's throat, and it was as if his entire body had been cleansed. "So delicious!" Bufang exclaimed, intoxicated. With another bite, all the shrimp meat was scraped into his mouth, and he enjoyed this delicacy that made his body and mind happy. Hiss hiss. Smelling the fragrance of the meat in the air, the anger in the eyes of the supreme mantis shrimp became even more intense. The spirit energy in its body surged, and its sickle-like claws tore through the air once again, slashing toward Bufang. Its body was like a spring, charging toward Bufang. With a wave of the black turtle constellation walk, it smashed toward the supreme mantis shrimp. With a bang, the huge force of the mantis shrimp's attack actually sent the black turtle constellation walk flying. Bufang was startled. Another mantis shrimp shot out from the walk, and Bufang caught it in his hand. Dragging the black turtle constellation walk, Bufang turned around and ran without another word. The instantaneous explosive force of the supreme mantis shrimp was indeed terrifying. There was no benefit in fighting it head-on. Moreover, the most important thing now was to savor the taste of the braised mantis shrimp. Eating the braised mantis shrimp while being chased by the supreme mantis shrimp was so King exciting. Pa pa pa. Bufang stepped on the water once again, and the true energy in his body surged as he sped away. However, his hands were not the slightest bit sluggish. With a slap of the kitchen knife, the mantis shrimp flew up. Bufong chopped off its tail, and with a casual pull, the shell was peeled off, revealing the white and tender flesh that was still bouncing. As the fragrance assaulted his nostrils, Bufong took another bite. His mouth watered, and as he ate, Bufong's mouth was filled with oil. His face was filled with enjoyment. While Bufong was enjoying himself, the supreme mantis shrimp chasing after Bufong was not so happy. Its numerous legs were constantly flapping as it chased after Bufong. Just as it was about to catch up, a black wok smashed toward it. The hot and heavy wok made it a little dazed. That damned human took the opportunity to pull out another one of its little treasures and started to feast on it. The mantis shrimp was about to go crazy. Just like that, a human and a shrimp chased each other, gradually getting further and further away. As for Bufong, he was unknowingly heading toward the crystal mine. Waves surged up into the sky. Several figures were treading on the waves, releasing a tyrannical aura. In the sky, a huge metal warship was floating. Executive Fong, who was standing on it, clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the figures treading on the waves. Oceanic species experts. Executive Fong muttered. From those figures, Executive Fong could feel an extremely terrifying aura. The intensity of that aura was comparable to his. It was obvious that the other party was also a 10th grade divine echelon divine, physique echelon expert. His physical body was tyrannical, and his blood and energy were like a rainbow. Could it be that the oceanic species target was also the big crystal mine? Executive Fong instantly furrowed his brows. Then the corners of his mouth curled up, and the energy in his body surged like a raging wave. With a loud rumble, he confronted the oceanic species divine, physique echelon expert who was treading on waves. The oceanic species divine, physique echelon expert opened his eyes and looked at the metal warship in the sky with a solemn expression. Just as the two of them were confronting each other, a violent explosion occurred in the crystal mine's entrance. Boom! Several loud explosions resounded, and several figures in a sorry state dashed out from within. Chapter 392. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The swamp ground, which had hardened due to the dryness, emitted a loud rumble. Several figures rushed out of the crystal mine's entrance in a sorry state. They all emitted surging true energy. Wu Mu's complexion was extremely unsightly. He held a long sword in his hand, and sword energy surged out of it. The Serpentine Empress swayed her green tail, and her hair fluttered in the wind. Waves of true energy spread out from her body. They weren't the only ones in such a state. The Serpentine King, Du Kai, was bathed in blood, and lightning crackled around him. Many of the blue scales on his body had fallen off, and blood splattered everywhere. The three of them stared at the dark entrance of the crystal mine and sucked in a breath of cold air. Bang! Another loud bang rang out. Then, several figures dashed out of the cave. One of them was constantly bombarded by those beast-like figures. Finally, he was ruthlessly thrown out and smashed into the ground, smashing it into smithereens. Executive Fong, who was on the warship in the sky, narrowed his eyes. He discovered that the person who had been thrown to the ground and was coughing blood was the 9th grade supreme being he had sent into the mine. Bang! The spirit beasts landed around the entrance of the mine. Their bodies seemed as if they were made of crystals. They flickered with golden light and emitted an ice-cold aura. Their eyes were bloodshot and bloodthirsty, causing one's heart to tremble. There were a lot of spirit beasts, and they were densely packed together at the entrance of the cave, completely blocking it. Wu Mu and the Serpentine Empress looked at the spirit beasts with fear in their eyes. These spirit beasts were the culprits behind Baijan's injuries. They were also the reason why they were in such a sorry state. Executive Feng and the oceanic species experts narrowed their eyes, and a glint flickered in their eyes. Are those crystal beasts? The two of them muttered at the same time. It was obvious that they knew more about the spirit beasts in the crystal mine than Wu Mu and the others. However, were crystal beasts capable of resisting ninth-grade supreme beings? Executive Feng and the oceanic species experts sucked in a deep breath. They couldn't help but feel excited. The crystal beasts guarding the mine are already so powerful. Just how precious are the treasures within the crystal sources? Executive Feng's body suddenly leaned forward, and he placed his hands on the railing of the battleship. There was a fervent look in his eyes. Salty seawater spurted out from the cheeks of the sea race's divine realm warrior as he let out a shrill roar. That's right. That shrimp ancestor was definitely sleeping in that big crystal mine. Boom! The corners of Executive Feng's mouth curled up. Then he took a step forward, and his entire body instantly shot forward. Treading on the air, a powerful aura continuously surged out from his body. His blood and chi surged to the heavens, and his skin seemed to emit a faint radiance. His gaze was like lightning, and his aura was like a rainbow. The 10th grade divine realm, the divine body realm, had an incomparably tough body. Descending from the battleship, Executive Feng's speed seemed to have broken through the speed of sound. Accompanied by a rumbling sound of blood and chi, he appeared in front of the cave in an instant. The eyes of the crystal beasts shone with a red radiance. They roared and pounced towards Executive Feng. He raised his fist and smashed it down. These sturdy crystal beasts, which could withstand the attacks of a ninth-grade supreme being, were smashed into pieces, turning into shattered crystals on the ground. A red radiance soared into the sky from these shattered crystals and rushed into the cave. Executive Feng's body was incomparably tough. Every time he punched out, it seemed like a crystal beast would explode. He completely crushed these crystal beasts. The oceanic species' divine realm warrior's eyes were dazed. His webbed feet stomped on the sea waves. In an instant, waves surged up to the sky as his figure rushed towards Executive Feng. The gazes of the two divine realm warriors collided in the void, and there seemed to be lightning flickering in their eyes. Their blood and chi surged as they punched out at the same time. When their fists collided, waves of energy surged up to the sky. The oceanic species' divine realm warrior slightly retreated a few steps. His cheeks opened and water spurted out. Executive Feng also raised his eyebrows in surprise and shook his arm. The Grand Baron sect mainly cultivated the body. His body was much stronger than the ordinary divine physique echelon warriors who had broken through one of the supreme being's shackles. The oceanic species' divine realm warrior in front of him was unexpectedly able to fight him head-on without being defeated. The oceanic species was indeed a mystical race. Wu Mu and the Serpentine Sovereign were dumbstruck. When they felt the terrifying fluctuations of the battle between the two, they were frightened and their bodies trembled. Regardless of whether it was Executive Feng or the oceanic species' divine realm warrior, the strength they displayed was far beyond their understanding. When they punched out, their blood and chi seemed to be able to pierce through the clouds. These two were actually 10th grade divine realm warriors. Oh my god, how could a 10th grade divine realm warrior appear in the illusory spirit swamp? Why would a 10th grade divine realm expert be attracted to such a small crystal mine? Regardless of whether it was Executive Feng or the oceanic species' divine realm warrior, both of them were far stronger than the top experts in the southern region. Bang! Bang! Executive Feng and the oceanic species' divine realm warrior took a deep breath and started fighting again. Since they had reached the 10th grade divine realm, their speed was extremely fast. They almost broke through the sound barrier. The aftershocks of their battle caused Wu Mu and the others to retreat continuously. It was as if this place had become the battlefield of the two 10th grade divine realm warriors. The two of them fought to rush into the crystal mine. An intense explosion occurred at the entrance of the mine. The two divine physique echelon experts were like wild beasts. They rushed into the mine with their bodies and smashed the entrance. Hiss, 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 hiss. Countless crystal beasts roared and pounced toward the two of them. Their sharp attacks were aimed at them. However, a fist that was filled with blood and chi directly smashed the crystal beasts into pieces. Punch after punch, the two divine physique echelon experts fought their way out of the mine filled with crystal beasts. Outside the mine, Wu Mu and the others looked at each other in dismay. As they listened to the unceasing rumbles coming from the mine, they hesitated whether they should go in or not. Bang! Bang! Explosions and rumbles resounded. Along with these explosions, there was an alluring fragrance. That fragrance was mixed with the smell of wine and seafood. The people who smelled it couldn't help but tremble. Wu Mu and the others looked in the direction where the fragrance came from, puzzled. They saw two figures chasing after each other. The one being chased was a youth who carried a black wok on his shoulder. He was running with large strides. In his hand was a large, oily prawn that was stewed until it was bright red. He was excitedly eating it. As he ate, the oily juice splattered everywhere, and the fragrance assailed their nostrils. Behind him was a huge deep-sea mantis prawn. It was a supreme being deep-sea mantis prawn. Its fighting prowess was extremely terrifying. Its sickle-like claws were especially terrifying. They possessed a terrifying, oppressive force. Bang! The supreme mantis prawn burst forth once again. It wanted to tear the human apart, but the scorching black wok smashed toward it once again. Bufang took advantage of this opportunity to increase the distance between them. The supreme mantis prawn roared and its body twisted. It was so infuriating. The corners of Bufang's mouth curled up. He savored the delicious braised mantis prawn. It made him feel refreshed, both physically and mentally. The oceanic species experts, who were treading on the waves, widened their eyes when they saw this scene. What was going on? Wasn't the supreme mantis prawn supposed to be attacking the Serpentine City? Why did it run over here? Bufang slid forward, creating splashes of water. He stopped and took out the last mantis prawn from the black turtle constellation wok. He lifted the knife and skillfully peeled off the shell of the mantis shrimp. The oceanic species experts' mouths twitched. It was no wonder that the supreme mantis prawn wanted to kill this human. Looking at how skillfully he peeled the shell of the mantis prawn, they guessed that he had eaten a lot of mantis prawns. Moreover, he was eating a red-hot mantis prawn right in front of the supreme mantis prawn. Wasn't this obviously provoking the supreme mantis prawn? After finishing off the last mantis prawn, Bufang casually threw the remaining shell into the water and sank to the bottom. Bufang comfortably exhaled a breath of hot air. He licked his lips and licked the grease off. He felt as though his entire body had become unobstructed. This meal was really satisfying. The supreme mantis prawn was enraged. Its sickle-like claws struck down again. Bufang's mental force was extremely strong. He focused his mind and dodged to the left and right. He actually managed to dodge the attack, which he couldn't even catch a glimpse of. The oceanic species experts, who were treading on the waves, came back to their senses. Their eyes turned cold. The supreme mantis prawn was their companion. Since this human dared to provoke the supreme mantis prawn, he was their oceanic species enemy. Thus, roars resounded as the oceanic species experts in the sky charged down toward Bufang. Bufang's heart skipped a beat. There were so many of them, and they were all experts with extremely strong cultivations. He would have to be out of his mind to fight them recklessly. He took out the black turtle constellation wok and poured his true energy into it. In an instant, more than half of his true energy disappeared. The true energy that he had recovered from eating the mantis prawn was completely consumed. However, Bufang was expressionless. After the black turtle constellation wok was infused with true energy, it instantly emitted a dazzling golden light. In an instant, it became like a small mountain as Bufang smashed it. The black turtle constellation wok was incomparably heavy. Facing this, Bufang didn't hesitate. He turned around and ran. He charged straight into the mine, disappearing in an instant. Rumble. The black turtle constellation walk smashed down, and the supreme mantis shrimp slammed into it. It staggered a few steps back, and its head was spinning. The oceanic species experts all released their powerful energy to block the black turtle constellation walk. Boom! With a loud bang, the golden walk turned into green smoke and dissipated. The oceanic species experts in the sky stared at each other. However, they realized that Bufong was nowhere to be seen. The supreme mantis prawn shook its head. Its compound eyes rolled, then shrank as it roared. His body shot out and squeezed into the mine with a loud rumble. That huge body actually squeezed into that narrow mine. Wu Mu and the others looked at each other in dismay. The experts of the Grand Baron sect on the warship in the sky, as well as the members of the oceanic species, all sucked in a deep breath. Just how much did that human offend the supreme mantis prawn? This killing intent was simply too much. Bufong, who had charged into the mine, suddenly thought of something. He looked at the scattered crystals on the ground and couldn't help but curl up the corners of his mouth. Wasn't his temporary mission in the illusory spirit swamp to obtain the crystal sources in the big crystal mine? He originally wanted to find an opportunity to search for the big crystal mine. He didn't expect that he would accidentally stumble upon it. Boom! Boom! Just as Bufong was feeling excited, a loud sound came from behind him. Bufong was taken aback. He turned his head and saw the supreme mantis prawn's compound eyes rolling around. The prawn's sickle-like claws sliced through the surrounding stone walls and charged toward Bufong. It was really persistent. Bufong sucked in a deep breath. This supreme mantis prawn had gone crazy in order to kill him. Wasn't it afraid of getting stuck in such a narrow tunnel? Bufong cursed inwardly. Without any hesitation, he turned around and continued to run forward. The rumbling sounds behind him were unceasing. The path in front of him was pitch black. Bufong spouted out a ball of 10,000 bestial flames to illuminate the path in front of him. In the next moment, Bufong stepped on empty air. His expression froze. A crack had appeared beneath him. A powerful suction force came from the crack, and with a swoosh, Bufong was sucked into it. Rumble! Crushed stones flew everywhere. The supreme mantis prawn charged out with a loud bang. Its body was slightly bent, and its small feet were moving in the air. Suddenly, its eyes froze, and a suction force appeared beneath it. With a swoosh, the bewildered supreme mantis prawn was sucked in a crack. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.